Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto time travel and married young Tsunade and had kids? And subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the center of a ruined battlefield. His orange and black jacket torn and singed, blood, both his and his enemies, painting streaks across his face. Around him, the landscape of what had once been a verdant valley near the Land of Fire's eastern border had been transformed into a hellscape of shattered earth and crackling energy. Trees that had stood for centuries were reduced to splinters. The ground was scorched black in some places, frozen solid in others, and in still others, it simply didn't exist anymore, replaced by yawning voids that seemed to open onto nowhere. Across from him, hovering above the devastation with an expression of manic triumph, was the enemy. Naruto still didn't know his name. The man had appeared 3 days ago, emerging from what witnesses described as a tear in the sky itself. He wore robes that seemed to shift between existing and not existing, covered in sealing formulae that hurt to look at directly. His face was concealed behind a mask of white ceramic inscribed with temporal equations that Naruto recognized from his studies with the Uzumaki clan's forbidden scrolls, the kind of fuinjutsu that even his mother's people had deemed too dangerous to preserve. "You still don't understand, do you, Hokage?" The masked figure called out, his voice distorted as if speaking through layers of reality. "This isn't about destroying Konoha. This isn't about the shinobi world. This is about unmaking the mistake that created you." Naruto's eyes, blue as a summer sky but now edged with the vertical slits and orange pigmentation of Kurama's influence, narrowed. "I don't know what your problem is, but I've heard enough villain speeches to last a lifetime. I'm ending this now." He slammed his palms together, and the world erupted with golden chakra. 9 massive tails of energy materialized behind him, each one crackling with power that made the very air shimmer. This was beyond the Kurama chakra mode he mastered years ago. This was the complete fusion he'd achieved after decades of partnership with the 9-tailed fox. They were no longer merely allies. They were one being with 2 voices. "This fool reeks of temporal manipulation," Kurama's voice rumbled in their shared consciousness. "Be careful, Naruto. Whatever jutsu he's preparing, it's not from our time." "I know," Naruto muttered. "That's what worries me." The masked enemy's hands blurred through a sequence of hand seals, at least 50 in rapid succession, moving so fast that even Naruto's enhanced perception could barely track them. The seals were wrong, though. They weren't the standard 12 that every shinobi learned. These were ancient symbols, perhaps predating the Sage of 6 Paths himself, mixed with modern fuinjutsu theory in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Jikin Hokai no Jutsu, Mugenjai Kyuten. Time collapse technique, infinite reversal, reality cracked like glass. Naruto felt it happen, a sensation of everything being pulled backward and forward simultaneously, of cause and effect becoming meaningless. He reacted on instinct, channeling every scrap of chakra he possessed into a counter-technique. If this was a time-space jutsu, he needed to anchor himself to the present, to this moment, to prevent whatever erasure the enemy intended. Fuin, Jigen Taichaku. Sealing, dimensional anchoring. His own chakra manifested as a massive seal array beneath his feet, spreading outward in geometric patterns that burned themselves into reality itself. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Naruto thought it might work. The anchor seal began to glow, connecting him to the bedrock of existence. Then the 2 techniques collided. The explosion wasn't physical. It was metaphysical, a detonation of pure temporal energy that rewrote causality in a sphere roughly 1 mile in diameter. Naruto felt his anchor seal shatter. He felt the enemy's technique fracture as well, its intended effect going catastrophically wrong. Instead of erasing him from existence, instead of sending him to some void between moments, the combined energies created something neither of them had intended. A rift, not through space, but through time itself. Naruto saw it open beneath him, a spiraling vortex of blue and white light, shot through with lightning that existed in the past, present, and future simultaneously. He tried to jump clear, tried to use the flying thunder god technique to escape, but his spatial markers were meaningless here. The rift didn't care about distance. It only cared about duration. "Naruto!" Kurama's voice was panicked now, a tone Naruto hadn't heard from his partner in decades. "I can't," The seal that binds us is fracturing. The temporal stress is too much. Stay with me. Naruto shouted, reaching inward with his consciousness, trying to hold on to the bond that had sustained him for so long. But it was like trying to hold water in his bare hands. He felt Kurama's presence begin to scatter, pulled into different moments. The Nine Tails wasn't being erased. It was being dispersed across time itself, its consciousness fragmenting into dozens of different temporal instances. Find me again. Kurama's voice came from far away now, already fading. Whenever you end up, whatever time receives you, find the younger me. Remind me who we became together. Promise me, Naruto. I promise. Naruto screamed into the vortex as it swallowed him whole. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the masked enemy, also being pulled into the rift, his body disintegrating into temporal fragments as his own jutsu consumed him. There was a moment of savage satisfaction. At least the bastard hadn't survived either. And then there was nothing, 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 and then everything. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he immediately regretted it. Sunlight, harsh and unfiltered, stabbed into his retinas like kunai. He groaned, rolling onto his side, and became aware of several things in rapid succession. His entire body ached with a bone-deep exhaustion that even his enhanced healing couldn't immediately address. His chakra levels were critically low, barely a fraction of his normal reserves. And most alarmingly, he couldn't feel Kurama's presence at all. Not scattered. Not dormant. Just absent. Panic surged through him, but years of experience forced it down. Panic got you killed. Panic made you sloppy. He needed information, needed to understand where he was, when he was, and what had happened. Slowly, carefully, Naruto pushed himself to his feet. He was in a forest, that much was obvious. But something about it felt wrong. The trees were the right species for fire country, but they were younger? Smaller? No, that wasn't quite right. The forest itself was mature, but the damage he expected to see from decades of shinobi warfare wasn't there. The trunks weren't scarred by jutsu. The clearings weren't the result of explosive tag detonations. It was pristine in a way that forests near Konoha hadn't been pristine since before the Third Shinobi War? Since before the Second? No, Naruto whispered, looking down at his hands. They were his hands, the same hands that had trained under Jiraiya, that had mastered the Rasengan, that had become Hokage. But his clothing was wrong. Instead of his usual orange and black jacket, he wore the remnants of the ANBU-style combat gear he'd been wearing during the battle with the masked man. Most of it was shredded, but enough remained to mark him as, what? Not from this time, certainly. A sound made him freeze, footsteps, approaching fast. Multiple people, moving with the practiced stealth of experienced shinobi. Naruto's hand went instinctively to his kunai pouch, only to find it empty. He'd used everything in the fight. He was alone, nearly chakra exhausted, in an unknown location, potentially in an unknown time, with unknown hostiles approaching. In other words, it was Tuesday. Naruto grinned despite himself, crouching low behind a massive oak tree. If he was lucky, these were Konoha shinobi, and he could talk his way through this. If he wasn't lucky, well, he'd survived worse odds before. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. A voice rang out, female, young but hardened by experience, carrying an edge of authority. Come out. We know you're there. We've had this area under surveillance seal for the past 3 hours. You've got about 10 seconds before we stop being polite. Naruto's breath caught. He knew that voice. Older, wearier, and slurred by decades of sake in the version he'd known, but unmistakably the same voice nonetheless. Tsunade. But this wasn't the Tsunade who'd trained him, who'd served as Hokage, who'd been like a grandmother to his own children. This voice was sharp, uncracked by age or loss. This was Tsunade in her prime, or close to it, which meant he was at least 40 years in the past. Well, Naruto muttered, stepping out from behind the tree with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. This is going to be complicated to explain. He emerged into a small clearing, and time seemed to stop. There were 4 of them. 3 men in standard Konoha combat gear, clearly ANBU or Jonin level based on their stance and chakra signatures. But Naruto's attention was fixed entirely on the 4th figure. Tsunade Senju stood at the center of the group, and she was magnificent. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her face still unlined by the loss and grief that would mark it in the future. Her legendary strength was evident in every line of her posture. She stood like someone who'd never met an obstacle she couldn't punch through. Someone who'd earned her place among the Sannin through blood and skill rather than birthright alone. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, and she wore the combat outfit he'd seen in old photographs. The gray kimono-style top, the dark pants, the distinctive green haori with the kanji for gamble on the back. But it was her eyes that struck him most. They were the same amber brown he remembered, but they weren't tired yet. They hadn't seen Dan die. They hadn't lost Nawaki. They still held the fierce optimism of someone who believed they could save everyone. Naruto felt his heart break a little, knowing what was coming for her. "Well?" Tsunade demanded, her hand resting on the kunai at her belt. "You going to stand there gawking, or are you going to explain why you're on Konoha's eastern border wearing shredded ANBU gear with no identification, no authorization, and chakra signatures that don't match any living shinobi in our records?" One of the men beside her, a Hyuga, based on the pale eyes, added, "His chakra is strange, Tsunade-sama. It's enormous, even in his depleted state. But there's something else, something I can't quite identify. It's almost like two chakra systems overlapped," Tsunade finished, her eyes narrowing. "I feel it too. Medical ninja training." She took a step closer, and Naruto saw her hand begin to glow with the faint green light of diagnostic chakra. "Last chance, stranger? Who are you, and how did you get here?" Naruto considered his options. He could lie, create a cover story, pretend to be a refugee from another village. But lies had a way of unraveling, especially around people as sharp as Tsunade. He could tell the truth, but who would believe that he was a time traveler from 40 years in the future? That he was the Hokage of a Konoha that didn't exist yet? And even if they believed him, what would that change? His knowledge of the future could alter everything. Prevent deaths that needed to happen, stop events that forged the people he knew into who they became. The temporal paradox alone could destroy reality. But looking into Tsunade's young, fierce face, Naruto made a decision. Not to tell her everything, not yet. But not to lie either. "My name," he said carefully, "is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm a shinobi of Konohagakure. And He paused, choosing his words with unprecedented care. "I'm not supposed to be here. Not in this place. Not in this time." Tsunade's eyes widened fractionally. The Hyuga's Byakugan flared to life, veins bulging around his eyes as he examined Naruto more closely. The other two shinobi moved into combat stances. "A time-space jutsu gone wrong?" one of them asked. "Like the second Hokage's technique?" "Similar," Naruto admitted. "But not intentional. I was fighting someone, and our jutsu collided. I ended up here. Wherever and whenever here is." Tsunade studied him for a long moment, her medical chakra still active, scanning him. Naruto forced himself to stay still, to let her confirm that he wasn't lying, at least not about his physical condition. Finally she spoke. "You're telling the truth about the temporal displacement. Your cells show signs of chronological stress that I've only read about in the Nidame's sealed research. Your chakra network is trying to exist in two different time states simultaneously." She paused. "That shouldn't be survivable." "Yeah, well," Naruto managed a weak grin, "I've been told I'm pretty stubborn about things like surviving." "Uzumaki," the Hyuga said suddenly. "There are a few Uzumaki in the village. Refugees from Yuzushiyogakure's fall. But none with your chakra signature. And you look..." He hesitated. "Like someone?" Naruto prompted. "Like Nawaki-sama," Tsunade said quietly, and there was something dangerous in her voice now. "My brother. You have his eyes. His facial structure. She cut herself off. "Explain that." Now, Naruto's mind raced. He did look like Nawaki. He'd seen the photos. They were related distantly, both descendants of the Senju clan through different branches. But how to explain that without revealing too much? "The Uzumaki and Senju have been intermarrying for generations," he said carefully. "It's not impossible that we share features. As for my specific heritage," he decided on a partial truth, "I don't know my parents. I was orphaned young. It wasn't a lie, technically. He'd been orphaned as an infant, even if he knew now who his parents had been. Tsunade's expression softened slightly, though her guard remained up. We need to take you back to the village. The Hokage will want to question you personally. If you're really from the future, if you have knowledge of what's to come, that's both incredibly valuable and incredibly dangerous. I understand, Naruto said. But I need you to know something first. I don't intend to change major events. The timeline is fragile. Even small changes could have cascading effects. I'll answer what questions I can, but there are things I can't reveal. Things that need to happen for everything to work out right. Including bad things? Tsunade challenged. Including deaths? Naruto met her eyes, and in his gaze she saw something that made her take an involuntary step back. The weight of years she hadn't lived yet, the burden of choices she hadn't made, the grief of losses she hadn't suffered. Including, he said softly, everything that makes us who we need to be. The journey back to Konoha took 3 hours. They moved quickly, leaping through the trees with the practiced ease of experienced shinobi. Naruto kept pace easily despite his exhaustion. Muscle memory from decades of similar travel made it second nature. As they approached the village, Naruto's breath caught in his throat. It was Konoha, but not his Konoha. The village was smaller, the walls less extensive. The Hokage monument showed only 3 faces, the first, second, and third Hokage. His father's face wasn't there. Neither was Tsunade's, or Kakashi's, or his own. It drove home the reality of his situation more than anything else could have. He was a ghost here, a person who didn't exist yet, viewing a world that would be gone long before he was born. What year is it? He asked quietly. Tsunade glanced back at him. Year 32 of Konoha's founding. Why? Naruto did the math quickly. 43 years before his birth. Right in the middle of the Second Shinobi War. A time of violence, paranoia, and loss. A time when Tsunade would lose everything that mattered to her. No reason, he lied. Just trying to orient myself. They entered the village through the main gate, and Naruto couldn't help but stare. Despite the smaller size, despite the differences, it was still unmistakably home. The same basic layout, the same training grounds in the distance, even the same ramen stand. Though the sign read Ichiraku's in slightly different characters, and the owner was a much younger man than Tsuchi would be in Naruto's time, people stopped to stare as they passed. Naruto realized he must have looked quite the sight, battered, wearing strange clothing, being escorted by Tsunade Senju herself. Whispers followed in their wake. Is that another survivor from Uzushio? Look at his hair. Definitely Uzumaki blood. Who is he? Why is Tsunade-sama herself bringing him in? Could he be a spy? An infiltrator? Tsunade led them directly to the Hokage Tower, and Naruto's heart began to pound. He was about to meet Hiruzen Sarutobi in his prime. Not the aged, regret-worn Hokage who would one day sacrifice himself to save the village, but the man in his 40s, still known as the Professor and considered the strongest Hokage since Hashirama himself. They climbed the stairs, walked through corridors Naruto knew by heart but which were decorated differently, filled with different people, carrying different concerns. Finally, they reached the Hokage's office. Tsunade knocked once, firmly. Lord Third, I'm back from the border patrol. I brought someone you need to meet. Enter, came the voice, strong and commanding in a way Naruto had never heard it. The door opened, and Naruto stepped into a room he'd stood in 1,000 times before. But instead of the elderly Hiruzen he remembered, behind the desk sat a man in his prime. Dark hair not yet fully gray, face stern but not yet lined with the weight of too many funerals, eyes sharp and assessing. Beside him, reviewing what looked like battle reports, stood 3 other figures that made Naruto's heart stop. Jiraiya, barely 30, his white hair not yet fully grown out, his face without the lines that would be carved by decades of wandering and loss. He looked up at their entrance, and his eyes widened with something Naruto couldn't quite identify. Orochimaru, still wearing Konoha's headband, his pale face curious rather than cruel, his golden eyes alight with scientific interest rather than the mad hunger for immortality that would consume him. He studied Naruto like a fascinating specimen, and standing by the window, arms crossed, was Dan Kato, the man Tsunade would love and lose. looking vital and alive and utterly unaware of the fate waiting for him on a battlefield not so far in the future. Well, well, Jiraiya said, his voice lacking the gravitas it would gain with age but carrying no less charisma. Now this is interesting. Hey kid, you wouldn't happen to be related to Kushina Uzumaki, would you? Because you've got that same wild chakra signature, and I gotta say, the resemblance is kinda uncanny. Naruto froze. Kushina. His mother. She was alive here, somewhere in this village. Probably a teenager, maybe already being considered as the next Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. He could meet her. Could know her. Could save her from the death that would take her far too young. But should he? That's enough, Jiraiya, Hiruzen said, his voice cutting through the speculation. He stood, and despite being several inches shorter than Naruto, his presence filled the room. Young man, you've been identified as a temporal displacement, someone thrown through time by a jutsu malfunction. Is this correct? Naruto straightened, falling into a formal stance more from habit than conscious thought. Yes, Lord Hokage. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm from approximately 40 years in your future. A battle with an enemy using forbidden time-space techniques resulted in my displacement to this era. The room fell silent. Even Orochimaru, usually so composed, looked genuinely surprised. 40 years, Hiruzen repeated slowly. And in your time, what was your role? Your rank? This was it. The moment where Naruto had to decide how much truth to reveal. He met the Hokage's eyes and made his choice. I was the 7th Hokage of Konohagakure, he said simply. And I need your help to figure out how to get back. Or if I even can. The explosion of questions, disbelief, and demands for proof that followed would mark the beginning of Naruto's strangest adventure yet. But as he stood there, facing legends in their youth, meeting the eyes of a Tsunade who didn't know him yet but who would, in another timeline, become one of the most important people in his life, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that the temporal accident might not have been an accident at all. Somewhere, somewhen, something had wanted him here. The question was, why? The silence that followed Naruto's declaration lasted approximately 3 seconds before all hell broke loose. The 7th Hokage? Jiraiya barked out a laugh, though his eyes remained sharp and calculating. Kid, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but his chakra signature supports the claim, Orochimaru interrupted, his golden eyes gleaming with fascination. The temporal displacement is real, Jiraiya. I can feel it from here. His very existence is slightly out of phase with our present. It's quite remarkable, actually. The amount of chakra required to survive such a phenomenon would be enormous, Tsunade finished, her medical training evident in how she assessed him. I examined him on the way here. His chakra coils are at least 10 times the density of a normal shinobi's. Even depleted as he is now, he has more chakra than most jonin at full capacity. Dan Kato stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. Lord Hokage, if we assume he's telling the truth, and the evidence suggests we should at least consider it, then we need to establish protocols. Knowledge of the future is dangerous. It could alter the timeline in catastrophic ways, Naruto finished for him. I know. Trust me, I've been thinking about nothing else since I arrived. He turned to Hiruzen, forcing himself to meet the 3rd Hokage's penetrating gaze. I won't share information about specific events. I can't. Some things need to happen, even if they're painful, because they lead to necessary outcomes. Hiruzen studied him for a long moment, then gestured to a chair. Sit. All of you, actually. This conversation will take some time. As everyone found seats, Tsunade positioning herself where she could watch Naruto closely, the Hokage pulled out his pipe and began the ritual of packing it with tobacco. Let's start with what you can tell me. Your name is Naruto Uzumaki, and you claim to have served as the 7th Hokage. That means at least 6 others held the position before you. That's correct, Naruto said carefully. And you can't tell us who they were? Naruto hesitated. Some of them were in this very room. But revealing that could change everything, could make them act differently, make different choices, pursue different paths. It's complicated. Some of them haven't been born yet. Others are people you know, and telling you would alter their trajectories. What about the 4th, 5th, and 6th? Jiraiya pressed. Surely those couldn't be anyone we know. They'd be from after our time. It was a clever trap. If Naruto said yes, he'd have to explain how people from after their time could still be affected. If he said no, he'd have to admit that people in this room would become Hokage, narrowing down the possibilities considerably. The timeline is more interconnected than you think, Naruto said finally. Decisions made today affect who becomes Hokage decades from now. I can't risk it. Orochimaru leaned forward, his voice smooth as silk. Then what can you tell us? Surely you didn't just appear here with no purpose. If this was a jutsu malfunction, there must be a way to reverse it, to send you back. That's what I'm hoping, Naruto admitted. But I don't know how. The technique that brought me here was a combination of forbidden temporal manipulation and my own attempt to anchor myself to my present. When they collided, he trailed off, remembering the sensation of reality tearing apart. I've never seen anything like it. Describe the sealing formula, Orochimaru demanded. Every detail you can remember. Naruto closed his eyes, reaching back into his memory. The Uzumaki blood in his veins gave him an innate understanding of sealing techniques, and he'd studied Fuinjutsu extensively after the war. Slowly, carefully, he began to describe what he'd seen. The ancient symbols mixed with modern theory, the way the chakra had flowed, the sensation of causality itself bending. As he spoke, Orochimaru produced paper and began sketching. His hand moved with incredible speed and precision, recreating the formula from Naruto's description. When Naruto finished, Orochimaru stared at the paper with an expression of genuine awe. This is impossible, he breathed. Half of these symbols predate the Sage of Six Paths. The other half won't be developed for. He looked up sharply at Naruto. For decades, whoever created this had knowledge from multiple time periods. Or, Dan said slowly, someone else also traveled through time. Someone who wanted this to happen. The implications hung in the air like a kunai waiting to drop. You said you were fighting an enemy, Tsunade spoke up, her voice cutting through the speculation. What did they want? Why attack you specifically? Naruto's jaw tightened. He said something about unmaking the mistake that created me. I don't know what that means. I don't know who he was or where he came from. He appeared 3 days ago in my time, already wielding temporal jutsu that shouldn't exist. A paradox, Hiruzen said quietly, finally lighting his pipe. Someone from a potential future, coming back to prevent your existence, which may have inadvertently caused the very circumstances they wanted to avoid. He took a long draw, exhaling smoke that curled toward the ceiling. Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, in your time, is Konoha still standing? Yes, Naruto said immediately. Stronger than ever. We've achieved peace with the other villages. The shinobi world is more unified than it's been since the Warring States period. Jiraiya's eyebrows rose. Peace? Actual peace? Not just a ceasefire. It wasn't easy, Naruto admitted. It took a war, the Fourth Shinobi War, to make everyone realize we had to work together or destroy ourselves. But yes, by my time, we have genuine cooperation between the 5 great nations. The Fourth War, Hiruzen repeated. Meaning there's a third one coming as well. Naruto cursed internally. He'd already revealed too much. I can't, we understand, the Hokage interrupted gently. You can't tell us about specific events. But general trends, the broad strokes of history, those might be permissible. Especially if they help us understand your situation and potentially find a way to return you to your proper time. It was a reasonable request, but Naruto could see the calculation behind it. Hiruzen was probing, testing what information he could extract. The man hadn't earned the title professor for nothing. He was a master of gathering intelligence. I'll tell you what I can, Naruto said carefully. But I reserve the right to refuse questions if I think the answers would be too dangerous. Fair enough, Hiruzen nodded. Then let's start with you. You claim to be Uzumaki, which the evidence supports. But you also mentioned being orphaned. How did you come to be Hokage? What was your path? This, at least, Naruto could discuss without too much danger. His personal history was unlikely to cause paradoxes. He wouldn't even be born for decades, after all. I was orphaned the day I was born, he began, and saw Tsunade's expression soften slightly. My parents died protecting the village from a catastrophic attack. I grew up alone, ostracized by many in the village because He paused, considering how much to reveal. Because I carried a burden that frightened people, a power that was sealed inside me for the village's protection. A Jinchuriki, Orochimaru said immediately. You're a Jinchuriki. That explains the dual chakra signature Tsunade mentioned. Naruto nodded slowly. Yes. Though the entity sealed within me and I came to an understanding over the years. We became partners rather than prisoner and jailer. Which Biju? Jiraiya asked, leaning forward with intense interest. I'd rather not say, Naruto replied. It could affect events related to the Jinchuriki system, and that's too dangerous to mess with. Tsunade was watching him with an expression Naruto couldn't quite read. You said you were ostracized. Feared. That must have been difficult for a child. It was, Naruto admitted, old pain flickering across his face before he could suppress it. But it taught me something important. It taught me that people's hatred often comes from fear and misunderstanding, that if you're patient, if you never give up on them, you can change hearts and minds. That philosophy became the foundation of how I led as Hokage. Idealistic, Dan observed. But if it led you to the highest office in the village, it must have worked. It did. Eventually. Naruto's expression turned distant, remembering battles and losses, victories and sacrifices. The path wasn't easy. I failed more times than I can count. Lost people I cared about. Made mistakes that cost lives. But I never gave up on the idea that people could understand each other, that we could break the cycle of hatred. And did you? Hiruzen asked softly. Break the cycle? Yes. Mostly. There are always threats, always people who choose darkness. But the world I left behind was fundamentally different from the one I grew up in. Children from different villages trained together now. The Kage meet regularly not to negotiate ceasefires but to coordinate on mutual challenges. It's not perfect, but it's better. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed this. A future where the constant warfare that defined their lives had finally ended. Where Konoha stood strong and allied with its former enemies. It seemed almost impossible to imagine. This fourth war you mentioned, Orochimaru spoke up, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. How long from now does it occur? Naruto did the math quickly. About 50 years from this moment, give or take. And you participated in it? How old were you? 17. Tsunade's eyes widened. 17? They sent 17-year-olds into a world war? They sent everyone, Naruto said grimly. It wasn't a conventional war. The enemy was something that threatened the entire shinobi world. Every village, every nation. We had no choice but to fight together. What kind of enemy could pose that level of threat? Dan asked. Naruto met his eyes, and Dan actually flinched at what he saw there. The kind that's better left in the past, or the future, in this case. I can't tell you more without risking changes to the timeline that could prevent the very alliances needed to defeat it. Hiruzen stood, walking to the window that overlooked Konoha. The village stretched out below them, peaceful in the afternoon sun despite the war raging on its borders. You speak of preventing changes to the timeline, yet your very presence here is a change. Every conversation you have, every person who sees you, every action you take creates ripples. I know, Naruto said heavily. That's what terrifies me. I don't know what effect my presence will have. I don't know if the future I came from can even exist anymore, or if I've already created a divergent timeline just by being here. There are theories, Orochimaru said, his eyes alight with the fervor of scientific curiosity. The Nidame's research into temporal mechanics suggested that time might not be as linear as we assume, that multiple timelines could exist simultaneously, branching at points of significant change. The many worlds interpretation, Naruto said, and saw Orochimaru's eyes widen in surprise at his knowledge. Yeah, I studied some of the second Hokage's research after I became Hokage. Had to understand the flying thunder god technique. And that led me down a rabbit hole of temporal theory. You can use Tobirama's technique? Hiruzen asked sharply, among others. Though most of my abilities rely on the partnership with my Biju, and right now. Naruto's expression turned pained. Right now, I'm cut off from that power. The temporal displacement scattered it across different moments in time. I'm functioning at maybe 10% of my normal capacity. Even so, Tsunade interjected, you kept pace with us through 3 hours of high-speed travel while chakra exhausted. Your 10% is still impressive. Jiraiya had been unusually quiet, studying Naruto with an intensity that made the young Hokage uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. You mentioned your parents died protecting the village the day you were born, and you're Uzumaki. That's a pretty specific set of circumstances. He paused, and Naruto could see the wheels turning in that brilliant, if eccentric, mind. There's only one event I can think of that would fit that profile. Only one scenario where Uzumaki parents would die protecting Konoha on the same day their child was born. Jiraiya, Hiruzen's voice carried a warning. No, let me finish, Jiraiya insisted. The Uzumaki clan's specialty is sealing techniques. If a biju needed to be sealed, if there was an attack on the village by a biju, you need an Uzumaki to perform the sealing. And if they sealed it into their newborn child at the cost of their own lives. He looked at Naruto with dawning comprehension. You're not just any Jinchuriki. You're the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Tsunade gasped. The Kyuubi? But that means, it means Mito-sama's successor will eventually have a successor of their own, Jiraiya finished. And something will happen that forces them to seal the Nine-Tails into their newborn son. Naruto's silence was confirmation enough. Kushina, Tsunade breathed. You said you resembled Nawaki. But now that I look at you closely, you have her facial structure too. Around the eyes and the cheekbones. Kushina Uzumaki is going to become the next Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and decades from now, she'll seal it into you. I'm not confirming anything, Naruto said firmly. Because the moment I do, you'll start trying to prevent it. And maybe you should. Maybe my parents deserve to live long lives instead of dying for the village. But I can't make that call. The consequences are too far-reaching. So you'd let your own parents die? Orochimaru asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. To preserve the timeline? I don't know, Naruto admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice made everyone pause. I honestly don't know what I'd do if I knew for certain I could save them. That's why I can't give you specific information about future events. Because I don't trust myself to stay objective. Hiruzen returned to his seat, his expression grave. This is an impossible situation. We have a time-displaced shinobi from 4 decades in the future, carrying knowledge that could save countless lives or destroy reality itself. We need to decide how to handle this. House arrest seems prudent, Dan suggested. Not as a prisoner, but for his own protection as much as the timelines. Limit his contact with the general population until we understand the situation better. I agree, Tsunade added. And I should be his primary monitor. My medical expertise lets me track any changes in his temporal displacement, and I can ensure he's healing properly from the chakra strain. Naruto caught the look Jiraiya and Orochimaru exchanged, a flicker of amusement that suggested they saw through Tsunade's reasoning to a more personal interest. She was curious about him, about this stranger who spoke of peace and carried the weight of impossible knowledge. Very well, Hiruzen decided. Naruto Uzumaki, you'll be assigned quarters in the village under Tsunade's supervision. You'll have limited freedom to move about, but you're forbidden from discussing your origins or future knowledge with anyone not in this room. You'll report to me daily while we work on understanding your situation and potentially finding a way to return you to your proper time. And if there isn't a way? Naruto asked quietly. The Hokage's expression was sympathetic but firm. Then we'll deal with that when we must. For now, dismissed. Tsunade, get him settled. The rest of you, not a word of this to anyone. As far as the village is concerned, he's an Uzumaki refugee with amnesia from a traumatic event. As the group filed out of the office, Naruto felt the weight of his situation settling over him like a heavy cloak. He was stranded 40 years in his past, surrounded by legends he'd only known as older, weathered versions of themselves. His parents were alive somewhere in this village, young and unaware of the son they'd someday have and lose. And standing beside him, studying him with those sharp amber eyes, was Tsunade Senju before life had broken her and rebuilt her into the woman he'd known. This was going to be even more complicated than he'd thought. The apartment Tsunade led him to was small but comfortable, located in a quiet section of the village that Naruto vaguely recognized. In his time, this area would be home to the Yamanaka flower shop, but here it was mostly residential housing for mid-rank shinobi. It's not much, Tsunade said, unlocking the door, but it's secure and close to the hospital, which makes it easier for me to check on you. Naruto stepped inside, taking in the sparse furnishings: a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and a bathroom. It was more than he'd had as a child in his original timeline, and infinitely better than sleeping in the woods. It's perfect, he said sincerely. Thank you. Tsunade lingered in the doorway, clearly wrestling with whether to leave or press for more information. Finally, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Okay, we're alone now. No Hokage, no Sennin politics, no protocols. Just you and me. So let me ask you directly, how bad does it get for me? Naruto turned to face her, caught off guard by the directness of the question. What? I'm not stupid, she said, crossing her arms. The way you looked at me when we first met, it wasn't just recognition. It was pity. You know something about my future, something painful, and given what you've said about events needing to happen even if they're terrible. She met his eyes squarely. I can handle the truth. How bad does it get? Naruto warred with himself. This was exactly what he'd sworn not to do, give specific information about personal futures. But looking at Tsunade's determined face, he realized she wouldn't accept evasion. Bad enough that you leave the village for decades, he said quietly. Bad enough that you develop a phobia of blood despite being the world's greatest medical ninja. Bad enough that when I first met you, you'd given up on the very concept of being Hokage because you believed everyone who wanted that position was cursed to die young. Tsunade's face went pale. Everyone who, you mean Nawaki. And Dan. It wasn't a question. I can't confirm that, Naruto said, but his expression told her everything. When? She demanded. When do I lose them? Tsunade, I can't. When? Her voice cracked, and suddenly she wasn't the legendary Sannin but a young woman facing the possibility of losing everything she loved. If I know, maybe I can prevent it. Maybe I can save them, and maybe you can't, Naruto said firmly, stepping closer. Maybe you're trying to save them makes things worse. Maybe the experience of loss is what makes you into the person capable of saving thousands of other lives. I don't know. That's the problem with time travel. Every change could cascade into catastrophe. So I'm just supposed to sit here and wait for them to die. Tsunade's hands clenched into fists, and Naruto could see the chakra beginning to gather around them. Her legendary strength responding to emotional distress. No, Naruto said, his voice gentler now. You're supposed to love them while you have them. Treasure every moment. Make sure they know how much they mean to you, because whether you have them for 1 more day or 50 more years, that time is precious. Tsunade's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're speaking from experience. Yeah, Naruto admitted. I've lost a lot of people. My godfather, my teacher, my first real friend, comrades I fought beside. Each loss taught me something. Made me stronger in ways I couldn't have become otherwise. But I'd still give almost anything to have them back. Almost anything, Tsunade repeated, catching the qualifier. But not anything. Not if it meant undoing the good that came from their sacrifices, Naruto said. They died believing in something, in me, in the village, in the future. Undoing that would make their deaths meaningless instead of tragic but purposeful. Tsunade was quiet for a long moment, processing this. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. In your time, do I eventually become Hokage? Or does the grief win? Naruto smiled. You become the 5th Hokage. One of the greatest. You saved the village during an invasion, revolutionized medical ninja training, and heal wounds, both physical and political, that no one else could. Your strength, medical expertise, and sheer stubborn refusal to let people die on your watch define an era. A tear finally escaped, rolling down Tsunade's cheek. But first I have to lose everything. First, Naruto agreed softly, you have to learn that loss isn't the end. That you can break and still rebuild yourself into something even stronger. That's the lesson I learned from you, from who you became despite everything. Tsunade wiped her eyes roughly, then fixed him with a searching look. You really were Hokage, weren't you? I can hear it in how you talk. That's not just knowledge of history. That's the voice of someone who's had to make impossible decisions and live with the consequences. For better or worse, Naruto confirmed. She moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. I'll be back tomorrow morning to check your temporal displacement symptoms. Try to rest. Your chakra network needs time to stabilize. She hesitated, then added, and Naruto? Thank you for being honest with me, even when it was hard. Tsunade, he called out before she could leave. For what it's worth, you're exactly as amazing now as you were in my time. Maybe more so, because you haven't let loss dim your fire yet. Don't let my knowledge of the future make you afraid to live in the present. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left. Alone in the small apartment, Naruto collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Through the window, he could see the Hokage monument lit by the setting sun. Only 3 faces instead of the 7 he knew. Somewhere in this village, his mother was probably training, completely unaware that she'd someday give her life for a son not yet born. His father was out there too, perhaps already a Jonin, working toward the destiny that would make him the 4th Hokage. And Naruto had no idea if he just set changes in motion that would prevent his own birth, save countless lives, or destroy the future entirely. Kurama, he whispered into the empty room, hoping somehow his partner could hear him across the decades. I really hope you have a plan, because I'm flying blind here. Silence was his only answer. But tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tsunade would return, questions would continue, and Naruto would have to navigate the impossible task of living in the past without destroying the future. For a shinobi who'd saved the world multiple times, it was shaping up to be his most difficult mission yet. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange rhythm that Naruto struggled to adjust to. Each morning, Tsunade would arrive at his apartment with medical equipment and a determined expression, spending an hour examining his temporal displacement symptoms. The checkups were thorough and uncomfortable, her diagnostic chakra probing deep into his system, mapping the way his cells existed slightly out of phase with the present timeline. It's not getting worse, she reported on the 18th day, making notes in a scroll. But it's not getting better either. You're stable, but you're essentially existing in 2 time states simultaneously. Your body is here, but part of your chakra is still anchored to your original timeline. Is that dangerous? Naruto asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Long term? I have no idea. There's no precedent for this. Tsunade set down her brush and met his eyes. You're a living paradox, Naruto. The fact that you're alive at all defies everything we know about temporal mechanics. Story of my life, Naruto muttered. Defying the impossible, I mean. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I'm starting to believe that. She'd been warming to him over the past weeks, her initial suspicion giving way to cautious friendship. Their conversations had ranged from medical theory to philosophy, from training techniques to what life was like in a world at peace. She never asked directly about Dan or Nawaki again, but Naruto could see the questions in her eyes every time she looked at him. After the medical checkups, Naruto was allowed limited movement around the village, always with an ANBU shadow trailing at a discreet distance. He'd walked past his future apartment building, visited the training grounds where he'd learned the Rasengan, currently empty and unmarked by the countless gouges his technique would eventually carve into the earth, and stood outside the academy, watching children who wouldn't be born until after his own birth attending classes. The temporal vertigo was constant and disorienting, but the hardest moment had come on the 5th day, when he'd seen her, Kushina Uzumaki. She'd been walking through the market district with 2 other girls her age, laughing at something one of them said. At 14, she was all sharp angles and boundless energy, her distinctive red hair catching the sunlight like fire. She wore it long, not yet styling it into the high ponytail she'd favor as an adult. Naruto had frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. This was his mother, young, alive, completely unaware that she'd someday give birth to him, and die the same night sealing the 9 tails inside his infant body. She'd glanced his way, perhaps sensing his stare, and their eyes had met for just a moment. Her violet eyes, so different from his blue ones, inherited from a father he hadn't yet seen, had shown mild curiosity before she turned back to her friends. She didn't know him. Couldn't know him. He was a stranger, someone she'd walk past and forget within minutes. Naruto had returned to his apartment that day and hadn't left for 48 hours. You're brooding again, Tsunade observed, breaking him from his reverie. You've been doing that more lately. Want to talk about it? Just thinking, Naruto deflected. Being here is complicated. No kidding. She began packing up her medical supplies. Listen, I know you've been cooped up here for weeks, and Lord Third is satisfied that you're not a threat. How would you feel about getting some actual training in? You mentioned your abilities are severely limited without your Biju connection. Maybe working on the fundamentals would help, and it would give you something to do besides stare at walls and contemplate temporal paradoxes. Naruto perked up. Training? Seriously? Don't get too excited. I'm not talking about anything advanced, just basic conditioning and kata work to keep your skills sharp. Unless... She paused, a calculating look entering her eyes. Unless you'd be willing to share some of your future knowledge in exchange for more intensive training? What kind of knowledge? Medical techniques, Tsunade said immediately. You mentioned that in your time, I revolutionized medical ninja training. What changes did I make? What techniques did I develop? If you can give me even hints about the direction my research should take, it could save lives now, decades before I would have naturally developed those skills. Naruto considered this carefully. Medical knowledge seemed relatively safe. It wasn't about specific events or people, but about general techniques that could only help. And if Tsunade developed her techniques earlier, how many more lives might she save? I can share some things, he said slowly. But you have to understand, some of your greatest innovations came from specific experiences. The creation rebirth technique, for example, you developed that after losing people and being determined that no one else would die from injuries you could have healed. Tsunade's breath caught. I developed a technique called creation rebirth, among others. But I can't just hand you the formula. The technique is dangerous. It requires precise chakra control and understanding of cellular regeneration that comes from years of study. If you try to rush it based on my descriptions, you could kill yourself. Then help me build the foundation properly, Tsunade pressed. Don't give me the finished technique, give me the principles. Point me in the right direction and let me do the work to get there safely. It was a reasonable compromise, and Naruto found himself nodding. Okay. But in exchange, I need more than just basic training. I need to rebuild my combat skills from the ground up, accounting for not having access to my full power. Can you help with that? Tsunade grinned, and for the first time, Naruto saw a flash of the fierce joy she took in combat. Oh, I think I can manage that. Training Ground 7, tomorrow at dawn. And Naruto, don't expect me to go easy on you just because you're temporarily displaced. Wouldn't dream of it, Naruto replied, matching her grin. Training Ground 7 was remote enough to provide privacy but well-maintained enough to see regular use. Naruto arrived just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, the early morning mist still clinging to the ground. Tsunade was already there, stretching in preparation. She traded her usual outfit for training gear, practical gray pants and a dark green top that allowed for maximum mobility. Her forehead protector gleamed in the dawn light. Good, you're on time, she said. First rule of training with me: I don't tolerate laziness. Second rule: I don't pull my punches. Third rule: if you're going to hit the ground, hit it in a way that lets you get back up quickly. She cracked her knuckles, chakra already beginning to gather around her fists. Ready? Wait, we're starting with sparring? Naruto asked, alarmed. Shouldn't we warm up first or? Tsunade's fist came at him like a meteor. Naruto dodged on pure instinct, muscle memory from thousands of battles kicking in despite his depleted state. The punch missed his face by inches and continued into the ground behind him, where it created a crater 6 feet wide and 3 feet deep. Warm-ups for people who aren't trying to kill you, Tsunade called cheerfully, already launching into a spinning kick that Naruto barely blocked with his forearms. The impact sent him skidding backward, his feet carving trenches in the earth. She's fast, Naruto thought, falling into a defensive stance. Faster than I expected. And strong. I knew she was strong, but experiencing it firsthand is something else entirely. He couldn't fight her the way he'd fought in his prime. No shadow clones. That would reveal too much about techniques that hadn't been widely adopted yet. No Rasengan. Same problem, plus Jiraiya hadn't even invented it yet. No Sage Mode, no Kurama Chakra, no access to most of his signature abilities. He had Taijutsu, basic chakra manipulation, and whatever tricks he could improvise on the fly. It would have to be enough. Tsunade came at him again, and this time Naruto didn't just dodge, he deflected. His hand caught her wrist and redirected the punch's momentum, using her own strength against her to create an opening. He struck at her exposed ribs with a palm strike, pulling back at the last second to avoid actually hurting her. She noticed. What was that? You had an opening and you hesitated. I'm not trying to actually hurt you, Naruto protested. Why not? I'm certainly trying to hurt you. As if to prove the point, she swept his legs out from under him. Naruto twisted in midair, landing in a crouch instead of on his back. Better, but you're still holding back. You're fighting like you're afraid of your own strength. I'm used to having a lot more power to work with, Naruto admitted, circling her carefully. I'm still calibrating to my current limitations. Then stop calibrating and start adapting. Tsunade's expression turned serious. You said you were Hokage. That means you faced enemies who outclassed you in raw power. How did you compensate? Naruto thought back to his fights with Pain, with Madara, with Kagaya. Strategy. Using the environment. Turning their strengths into weaknesses. Fighting smarter instead of harder. Show me. They engaged again, but this time Naruto changed his approach. Instead of meeting her strength head-on, he used the training ground itself as a weapon. He led her near the trees, using the trunks for rapid direction changes. He kicked up dust and mist to obscure her vision. When she punched the ground to create shockwaves, he was already in the air, using the debris she'd thrown up as platforms. It wasn't enough to actually hurt her. She was still a Sannin, after all, and he was operating at a fraction of his normal capacity. But he managed to land a few glancing blows, force her to adjust her strategy, make her work for her dominance. After 20 minutes, Tsunade called a halt, breathing only slightly harder than normal. Naruto, meanwhile, was gasping for air, sweat pouring down his face. Not bad, she assessed, tossing him a water canteen. Your fundamentals are excellent, better than most jonin I've seen. Your taijutsu style is interesting though. I don't recognize it. It's a mix, Naruto explained between gulps of water. I trained under multiple masters, each with their own style. What you're seeing is decades of synthesis, taking the best elements from each and adapting them to my strengths. Multiple masters, Tsunade repeated thoughtfully. Including me, apparently. I can see hints of my style in how you deflect strikes. Naruto nodded. You taught me medical ninjutsu basics and close-quarters combat principles. You said, he paused, then decided to continue. You said I was hopeless at the fine control needed for medical jutsu, but that I could at least learn to punch properly, and not die from injuries that should have been treatable. Tsunade laughed. That sounds like something I'd say. Her expression turned curious. Show me your chakra control. Basic tree walking and water walking. I assume you can do both? Of course. Then show me this. She held out her hand, and a bubble of water materialized above her palm, held together by nothing but precise chakra manipulation. Inside the bubble, Naruto could see tiny fish made of chakra swimming in circles, each one moving independently. This is an advanced control exercise I've been developing, Tsunade explained. It requires maintaining multiple chakra constructs simultaneously while keeping them all in motion. Most shinobi can't manage more than 1 or 2 fish. I can do 12. How many can you do? Naruto frowned, focusing his chakra. Water manipulation wasn't his strongest skill. He'd always been better at wind release. But Tsunade was right that in his depleted state, control mattered more than power. He created his own water bubble, much less stable than hers. Then, carefully, he began forming fish inside it. 1, 2, 3. By the 5th one, the bubble was starting to destabilize. By the 7th, his concentration was wavering. 7, Tsunade observed. That's actually impressive for someone with your chakra reserves. Large reserves usually mean worse control. It's like trying to do precision work with a fire hose instead of a scalpel. The fact that you can manage 7 suggests you've put serious work into refinement. I had to, Naruto said, letting the technique disperse. Most of my signature abilities required precise control despite massive chakra expenditure. I spent years training to, he stopped, realizing he was about to mention the Rasengan. To what? Tsunade prompted. To use techniques that combine power and precision, Naruto finished carefully. It was necessary for my fighting style. She studied him for a moment, clearly aware he was editing himself, but let it pass. Alright. Let's talk about what I can teach you and what you can teach me. You wanted to rebuild your combat skills from the ground up. I can help with that. In exchange, you'll share principles of future medical techniques. Not the complete methods, but the theoretical foundations. Agreed. Good. Then let's start with your medical knowledge. You said I developed something called creation rebirth. What's the basic principle? Naruto considered how to explain this safely. It's based on accelerated cell division and regeneration. The idea is that instead of healing injuries after they occur, you stimulate your body to constantly regenerate damage in real time. It makes you nearly impossible to kill in combat because wounds heal almost instantly. Tsunade's eyes widened. That's incredible. But the chakra cost must be enormous. It is. And there's a price. The accelerated cell division shortens your lifespan. Every time you use it, you're literally burning through years of your life. Naruto met her eyes seriously. That's why I can't just give you the technique. You need to understand cellular biology on a level that takes decades to develop. You need to build up to it safely, or you'll age yourself to death in minutes. But the foundation, Tsunade pressed. The theoretical framework. What should I be studying? Mitosis, Naruto said. Cellular regeneration rates. The relationship between chakra and telomere length. How to stimulate healing without triggering uncontrolled growth. Because if you get the balance wrong, you don't get regeneration. You get cancer. Tsunade was already pulling out a scroll and taking notes. Telomeres. I've read about those in Orochimaru's biology research. He theorizes they're related to aging, but the mechanism isn't well understood yet. He's right. They shorten with each cell division, which is part of what causes aging. Your technique, when you eventually develop it, will need to account for that, or you'll burn through your telomeres in hours. Naruto paused. There's another technique you developed too, the strength of 100 seal. What's that? A storage seal. You place it on your forehead and gradually store chakra in it over years. When you release it, you have access to all that stored energy at once, which is what makes creation rebirth sustainable in combat. Without the seal, using creation rebirth would drain you dry in minutes. Tsunade's hand unconsciously went to her forehead. A seal that stores chakra over time. The Uzumaki clan must have had similar techniques. They did. That's part of why you sought them out. Well, we'll seek them out to develop the seal. Naruto hesitated, then added, my mother helped you refine it, actually. Before she died. The mention of Kushina made Tsunade's expression soften. You know her. In the future. Yeah. She's... Naruto's voice caught. She's important to me. Very important. I'll make sure to introduce you, Tsunade said gently. Once Lord Third approves expanded contact. She'd probably like meeting another Uzumaki, especially one from the future who clearly cares about her. I don't know if that's a good idea, Naruto said quickly. Too quickly. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. Why not? What aren't you telling me about Kushina's future? Damn it. Naruto scrambled for a response that wouldn't reveal too much. She's connected to major events in my timeline. Events I can't risk changing. Connected how? Tsunade, please. Don't push this. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll drop it for now. But Naruto, if Kushina's in danger, if there's something I could do to help her, I need to know. If I can tell you without destroying the timeline, I will, Naruto promised. That's the best I can offer. They spent the rest of the morning trading knowledge. Naruto described the principles behind several medical techniques, not the complete formulas, but the theoretical foundations that Tsunade could use as starting points for her own research. In exchange, she drilled him on taijutsu fundamentals, correcting small inefficiencies in his form that had crept in over years of relying on overwhelming power rather than perfect technique. By noon, they were both exhausted but satisfied. As they prepared to leave the training ground, an ANBU operative materialized beside them. Tsunade-sama, Naruto Uzumaki-san, the masked figure said formally. Lord Hokage requests your presence immediately. There's been a development on the eastern border. We're mobilizing for combat operations. Naruto and Tsunade exchanged glances. The Second Shinobi War had been ongoing when Naruto arrived, but so far the fighting had been distant, something happening at the borders rather than near Konoha itself. What kind of development? Tsunade asked sharply. IWA has launched a major offensive. Multiple battalions supported by demolition specialists and Jinchuriki assets. They're pushing toward Fire Country's eastern territory. The ANBU's voice was professionally neutral, but Naruto could hear the tension underneath. Lord Hokage is assembling a response force. You've been selected to lead the medical division, Jinchuriki, Tsunade repeated, her expression darkening. Which one? Unconfirmed. Possibly the Four Tails, based on preliminary reports. Naruto felt his stomach drop. A full-scale assault involving a Jinchuriki meant serious casualties. And if Tsunade was being deployed as medical support, what about me? He asked. Am I being deployed too? The ANBU turned to him. Lord Hokage requests your presence to discuss that possibility. Your combat capabilities are still being evaluated, but given the scale of the offensive, all available shinobi may be needed. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Tsunade said. Go ahead and inform Lord Third. The ANBU vanished in a swirl of leaves. Tsunade looked at Naruto, her expression conflicted. A major battle. If you're deployed with me, I can keep an eye on you, make sure your temporal displacement doesn't worsen under combat stress. But putting me in a war zone 40 years before I'm born is risky, Naruto finished. I know. Trust me, I'm very aware of how dangerous this is. Can you fight? She asked bluntly. I saw what you can do in sparring, but actual combat is different. People will be trying to kill you. You won't have your full power. Can you handle that? Naruto met her eyes steadily. I've been in more battles than I can count. Wars, skirmishes, duels, last stands, you name it. Yes, I'm weaker than I've ever been, but I'm still a shinobi of Konoha, and if my village needs me, I'll fight. Tsunade nodded slowly. Then let's go see what the Hokage has to say. But Naruto, if you're deployed with my unit, you follow my orders. No heroics, no trying to save everyone, no temporal martyr complex. Understood? Understood, Naruto agreed. But as they headed toward the Hokage Tower, he couldn't shake the feeling that this deployment would change everything. History was about to be written, or rewritten, and for the first time since arriving in this era, Naruto would be an active participant rather than an observer. The question was, what would his participation cost? The briefing room in the Hokage Tower was packed with Konoha's finest. Naruto recognized faces from history books and old photographs, all decades younger than he'd ever seen them. The tension in the room was palpable. This wasn't a routine skirmish. This was war. Hiruzen stood at the front. A large map of the eastern border spread across the table. Red markers indicated IWA positions. Blue markers showed Konoha's forces. The red vastly outnumbered the blue. The situation is critical, Hiruzen began without preamble. IWA has committed at least 3 battalions to this offensive, roughly 1,500 shinobi, including their demolition corps and at least 1 Jinchuriki, confirmed to be Rashi of the Four Tails. Their objective appears to be the Canopy Bridge. Murmurs rippled through the room. Naruto leaned toward Tsunade. Why is that bridge important? It's Iwa's primary supply route into Fire Country, she whispered back. If they secure it, they can bring in reinforcements and supplies indefinitely. If we destroy it, we cut off their advance and force them to retreat. Our intelligence suggests they're 3 days from reaching the bridge, Hiruzen continued. We need to intercept them before they establish defensive positions. I'm deploying a rapid response force of 200 elite shinobi divided into 4 divisions. He pointed to different sections of the map. Division 1, led by Jiraiya, will engage their main force here, creating a distraction and drawing their attention. Division 2, under Orochimaru, will move through the forest here, targeting their supply lines and demolition specialists. Division 3 will be our medical support, led by Tsunade, positioned here where they can respond to casualties from either of the first 2 divisions. And Division 4? Someone asked. Hiruzen's expression turned grim. Division 4 is our final option. A small team of infiltration specialists who will attempt to destroy the Canopy Bridge if we can't stop IWA from reaching it. If the bridge falls, their entire offensive collapses. What about the Jinchuriki? Orochimaru asked, his golden eyes gleaming with interest. The Four Tails is no trivial threat. Jiraiya will focus on containment if the Jinchuriki enters the battlefield, Hiruzen said. We're not trying to kill or capture it. That's beyond our current resources. We just need to delay it long enough for our primary objectives to succeed. He looked around the room, his gaze settling on Naruto. We have an unconventional asset available. Naruto Uzumaki, despite his unique circumstances, has combat experience that may prove valuable. However, deploying him is risky for multiple reasons. All eyes turned to Naruto. He forced himself to stand straight, to project confidence despite the weight of scrutiny. I can fight, he said simply. Tell me where you need me. Can you though? Challenged a Jonin Naruto didn't recognize. We've heard stories, a time traveler, a future Hokage, all these grand claims. But none of us have seen you in actual combat. For all we know, you'll fold the moment real danger appears. That's enough, Tsunade snapped. I've been training with him. His fundamentals are solid, and his tactical thinking is beyond most Jonin I've worked with. Training is different from combat, the Jonin pressed. In war, hesitation gets people killed. How do we know he won't freeze up? Naruto felt the old familiar anger rising, the frustration of being underestimated, dismissed, treated as less than he was. He'd dealt with it his entire life in his original timeline, but he'd also learned that actions spoke louder than words. Put me in Division 2, Naruto said, looking directly at Hiruzen. Infiltration and sabotage, that's where my skills will be most useful. I can move quietly. I can adapt to changing situations. And I understand demolition techniques well enough to counter Iwa's specialists. Orochimaru's eyebrows rose. You understand demolition? That's a specialized skill set. I've encountered it before, Naruto said carefully, thinking of Deidara and all the other explosive happy shinobi he'd fought over the years. Hiruzen considered this. Orochimaru, what's your assessment? The pale Sannin studied Naruto with those unsettling golden eyes. If Tsunade vouches for his basic competence, I'm willing to take him in my division. Consider it a field test. If he performs adequately, good. If he doesn't. Orochimaru smiled, and there was something predatory in it. Well, war has a way of weeding out the weak. Lord Third, Tsunade interjected, I should note that Naruto's temporal displacement could become unstable under extreme stress. Having him in a medical division where I can monitor him would be safer. Safer for him, Hiruzen acknowledged. But Division 2's mission is critical. If Naruto's skills can contribute to its success, that may outweigh the medical risk. He looked at Naruto. The choice is yours. Division 2, where you'll face direct combat and high risk, or Division 3, where you'll be in a support role but under medical supervision. Naruto didn't hesitate. Division 2. I'm a shinobi, not a patient. I can help more on the front lines. Tsunade looked like she wanted to argue, but Hiruzen nodded. Very well. Orochimaru, he's assigned to your division. You leave in 2 hours. Dismissed. As the room emptied, Tsunade grabbed Naruto's arm. Are you sure about this? Orochimaru's missions tend toward the extreme. And if something happens to you out there, I'll be fine, Naruto assured her. I've survived worse odds than this. You keep saying that, but you won't tell me what worse odds actually means, Tsunade said, frustrated. How am I supposed to keep you safe if I don't know your limits? You're not supposed to keep me safe, Naruto said gently. You're supposed to focus on your mission. Save the people you can save. I'll handle myself. She searched his face, then sighed. Fine. But if you die 40 years before you're born and create some kind of paradox that destroys reality, I'm going to be very annoyed. Despite the tension, Naruto smiled. Noted. I'll do my best to avoid paradoxical death. 2 hours later, Division 2 assembled at the village gates. 25 elite shinobi, each one a specialist in infiltration, assassination, or sabotage. They wore dark clothing designed to blend into shadows, and their faces were grim with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Orochimaru stood at the front, looking every inch the legendary Sannin despite his youth. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made even seasoned jonin stand straighter. Our mission is simple in concept, difficult in execution. We will move through enemy territory, eliminate their demolition specialists, and disrupt their supply lines. We will do this quietly, efficiently, and without mercy. IWA has brought war to our doorstep. We will show them the cost of that mistake. His eyes swept over the group, lingering on Naruto for just a moment. You will follow my orders without question. You will move when I say move, strike when I say strike, and retreat when I say retreat. Anyone who breaks formation or acts independently will be left behind. This is not training. This is war. Am I understood? Yes, Orochimaru-sama. The division responded in unison. Naruto joined the chorus, but his mind was already racing ahead. He was about to fight in the Second Shinobi War, alongside a version of Orochimaru who hadn't yet turned traitor, in a battle that would shape the course of history. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought whispered, what if this is where everything changes? What if I'm supposed to be here? But there was no time for philosophical debates. Orochimaru gave the signal, and Division 2 vanished into the forest, moving toward a battle that would test everything Naruto had claimed to be. The Second Shinobi War was about to meet the 7th Hokage. History would never be quite the same. The journey to the eastern border took 2 days of hard travel through increasingly hostile territory. Division 2 moved like ghosts through the forest, silent, efficient, leaving no trace of their passage. Naruto found himself impressed by Orochimaru's leadership despite everything he knew about the man's future. Here, now, Orochimaru was brilliant without being cruel, strategic without being sadistic. He positioned scouts perfectly, rotated his forces to prevent exhaustion, and seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy patrol patterns. It was a stark reminder that the Sannin hadn't started as monsters. They'd been shaped into legends by the same war Naruto was now fighting in. On the second night, as they made camp in a concealed ravine, Orochimaru approached where Naruto sat maintaining his equipment. You move well, the Sannin observed, settling onto a nearby rock. Better than most Chunin, despite your claims of being severely weakened. Your footwork is exceptional. I've been watching. You barely disturb the ground when you land. I had good teachers, Naruto replied carefully. So Tsunade claims. She speaks highly of you, which is unusual. Tsunade doesn't give praise lightly. Orochimaru's golden eyes gleamed in the firelight. Tell me something, Naruto Uzumaki. In your time, what became of me? The question caught Naruto off guard. What? You're from 40 years in the future. You know how our stories end, Tsunade's, Jiraiya's, mine. I'm curious what fate awaits me. Do I die heroically in battle? Become Hokage? Retire peacefully to pursue research? Naruto chose his words very carefully. I can't answer that. The future isn't fixed, and telling you might change things in ways I can't predict. An evasion, Orochimaru noted. Which tells me the answer isn't pleasant. Interesting. He leaned back, seemingly unbothered. I've always wondered what would drive me to different paths, whether circumstances shape us, or whether our nature is predetermined. Both, Naruto said quietly. We're shaped by what happens to us, but we also choose how to respond. Two people can face the same tragedy and become completely different because of the choices they make. Philosophical, Orochimaru murmured. And spoken like someone who's faced such choices himself. What tragedy shaped you, I wonder? Loneliness, Naruto answered honestly. Growing up isolated, hated for something I couldn't control. It could have made me bitter, made me hate the village that rejected me. Instead, I chose to prove them wrong, to protect them anyway. Noble, Orochimaru said, and there was something unreadable in his expression. Or foolish. Why protect people who hated you? Because I understood them. They were afraid, and fear makes people cruel. But beneath the fear, they were just trying to protect what they loved. I couldn't hate them for that. Orochimaru was quiet for a long moment. You really were Hokage, weren't you? I can hear it in how you talk about the village. That's not just loyalty. That's the kind of understanding that comes from bearing responsibility for every life within those walls. Yeah, Naruto admitted. For better or worse, I was Hokage. Then let me ask you this, future Hokage too. Orochimaru smiled slightly. To whatever I become. If you could go back and change the tragedies that shaped you, would you? Naruto thought about his parents, about Jiraiya, about all the people he'd lost. No. Because those tragedies made me who I needed to be. Without them, I wouldn't have had the strength or understanding to do what needed to be done. The pain sucked, but it had purpose. Even if the purpose was purchased with blood, even then, Orochimaru stood, brushing off his pants. Thank you for the honesty. Get some rest, Naruto. Tomorrow we encounter the enemy, and I'll need you sharp. He paused, then added, for what it's worth, I hope whatever became of me in your timeline, I at least made interesting choices. As the Sannin walked away, Naruto couldn't help but think, you have no idea just how interesting. They hit the IWA supply convoy at dawn. Orochimaru had positioned them perfectly. High ground, sun at their backs, escape routes planned. The convoy consisted of 15 wagons loaded with explosive tags, weapons, and supplies, guarded by approximately 40 IWA shinobi. Teams of 3, Orochimaru whispered, his voice barely audible even to the shinobi crouched beside him. Eliminate the guards quietly. No one raises an alarm. Once the guards are down, we destroy the supplies and vanish before reinforcements arrive. Move. Division 2 split into their assigned teams with practiced efficiency. Naruto found himself paired with 2 jonin, a Hyuga named Hikaru and a woman named Satsuki who specialized in genjutsu. Stay behind us, Hikaru instructed quietly, his Byakugan already active. We'll handle the guards. You watch our backs. I can fight, Naruto protested. We don't know that yet, Satsuki said bluntly. Prove yourself by not getting killed, then we'll talk about offensive action. Naruto bit back his frustration. He was used to leading, not following. But they had a point. He was an unknown quantity to them, and in combat, trust had to be earned. They moved down the slope in complete silence. Hikaru's Byakugan identified guard positions, and Satsuki wove genjutsu that made them nearly invisible to casual observation. Naruto watched, impressed despite himself. These weren't the powerful, flashy techniques he was used to. They were subtle, professional, the work of shinobi who'd survived years of war through skill rather than raw power. Hikaru struck first, his gentle fist technique dropping an IWA guard before the man could cry out. Satsuki caught another in a genjutsu that made him think he was alone, allowing her to slit his throat from behind. Naruto saw a third guard turning toward them, hand moving toward his kunai pouch. No time for subtlety. Naruto moved on pure instinct, covering the distance in 2 steps and driving a knife hand strike into the guard's throat. The IWA shinobi went down choking, and Naruto caught his body before it could hit the ground and make noise. Hikaru glanced back, eyebrows raised. Not bad. They continued through the convoy, eliminating guards with ruthless efficiency. Naruto fell into the rhythm of it. The old, familiar dance of combat where every move mattered and hesitation meant death. It was darker than what he was used to, more brutal. No dramatic declarations or chances for redemption. Just quick, efficient killing. This was what war really looked like before he changed it. They'd cleared most of the convoy when everything went wrong. A child, couldn't have been more than 12, stumbled out from behind one of the wagons. An IWA genin, probably assigned to the convoy as his first real mission. His eyes went wide seeing the Konoha shinobi, seeing the bodies of his comrades. Contact! He screamed. We're under ATT. Satsuki's kunai took him in the throat, cutting off the warning. But it was too late. The damage was done. All around the convoy, IWA shinobi materialized from concealed positions. Not 40 guards. There had been at least twice that many, hidden, waiting for exactly this kind of ambush. It's a trap! Hikaru shouted, his Byakugan revealing the full scope of the enemy forces. At least 80 hostiles, moving to surround us. Orochimaru's voice cut through the chaos, amplified by chakra. Division 2, Combat Formation Delta. Fighting retreat toward Rally Point 3, the carefully planned stealth mission dissolved into bloody chaos. Naruto found himself back-to-back with Hikaru and Satsuki as IWA shinobi converged from all sides. A kunai whistled past his ear. He deflected another with his own blade, then had to duck under a sword swing that would have taken his head off. "We need to break through their line," Satsuki shouted, her hands blurring through seals. Genjutsu, flower petal escape, illusory cherry blossoms filled the air, confusing the enemy's perception. In the confusion, Hikaru struck, his gentle fist technique dropping 3 IWA shinobi in quick succession. Naruto added his own attacks, using the taijutsu fundamentals Tsunade had drilled into him to maximum effect. But there were too many. For every enemy they dropped, 2 more appeared. Division 2 was being surrounded, cut off from their escape routes. An explosion rocked the convoy. Someone had triggered the explosive tags. The blast threw Naruto off his feet, slamming him into a wagon hard enough to crack wood. His vision swam, ears ringing from the concussion. Through the smoke and chaos, he saw Orochimaru fighting like a demon, his sword flashing as he cut through IWA shinobi with terrifying efficiency. Nearby, a team of Konoha Chunin were being overwhelmed, 3 against 15 with no hope of survival. Naruto pushed himself up, every instinct screaming at him to help. But he was so weak compared to his normal state. No shadow clones, no Rasengan, no Sage Mode. What could he possibly do? Then he saw it, an IWA demolition specialist preparing a massive explosive seal, large enough to vaporize half of Division 2 in a single detonation. Time seemed to slow. Naruto knew that seal. It was a variation on the kind Pain had used to destroy entire sections of Konoha. If it went off, dozens of Konoha shinobi would die. He could stop it. He had the knowledge, the skills. But doing so would mean revealing abilities he shouldn't have, techniques that didn't exist yet in this timeline. The Konoha Chunin were still fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Orochimaru was too far away to intervene. In seconds, that seal would detonate. Naruto made his choice. He channeled chakra, more than he dared to use since arriving in this era, and formed the hand seals for a jutsu he'd learned from his godfather. Ninpo, Hari Jizo. Ninja art, Needle Jizo. His hair extended and hardened into countless white needles that shot toward the demolition specialist. The IWA shinobi's eyes widened in shock as the needles pierced his hands, disrupting his chakra control and causing the partially formed explosive seal to fizzle out harmlessly. Orochimaru's head snapped toward Naruto, eyes wide with recognition. That was Jiraiya's technique, a signature jutsu that the Toad Sage hadn't taught to anyone in this timeline yet. But there was no time to worry about exposure. Naruto was already moving, using the momentum of his attack to close distance with the demolition specialist. He couldn't let the man report what he'd seen, couldn't let him complete that seal. The IWA shinobi recovered quickly, pulling out a kunai and lunging at Naruto. They clashed in close quarters, trading blows with desperate intensity. The specialist was good, older, more experienced, fighting with the skill of someone who'd survived years of war. But Naruto had survived a world war at 17 and countless battles after. Experience counted for a lot. He deflected the kunai strike, drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus, and as the specialist doubled over, Naruto struck a pressure point on his neck that he'd learned from Tsunade's medical training. The IWA shinobi dropped unconscious. Around him, the battle was turning. Orochimaru had rallied Division 2, and they were carving a path through the enemy forces toward their escape route. The Konoha Chunin Naruto had saved were still fighting, injured but alive. "Fall back," Orochimaru commanded. "Fighting retreat. Move, move, move." Division 2 disengaged with practiced precision, using smoke bombs and explosive tags to cover their withdrawal. Naruto ran with them, his lungs burning, the borrowed chakra from Jiraiya's technique leaving him shakier than he'd expected. They ran for 15 minutes straight before Orochimaru finally called a halt in a defensible ravine. He immediately began counting heads, assessing casualties. 4 dead, 7 wounded, he reported grimly. Could have been much worse. That trap was well planned. They knew we'd come for their supplies. His eyes found Naruto. "You. With me. Now." Naruto followed Orochimaru to the edge of the ravine, out of earshot from the others. The Sanin's expression was unreadable. "That technique," Orochimaru said quietly. "Hari Jizo. That's Jiraiya's jutsu. He developed it 3 years ago and hasn't taught it to anyone. So explain to me how someone from the future knows a technique that currently only exists in Jiraiya's repertoire. Naruto met his gaze steadily. In my time, Jiraiya was my master. He taught me many of his techniques. Jiraiya, Orochimaru repeated slowly. Takes you as a student. That's interesting. He's never shown interest in taking on apprentices. Says teaching is too much responsibility. He studied Naruto with renewed interest. What else did he teach you? I can't tell you that. You know I can't, because it would alter the timeline. Yes, I'm aware of your restrictions. Orochimaru crossed his arms. But you just revealed future knowledge anyway. You used a technique that doesn't exist in the present to save those Chunin. Why? Because the alternative was letting them die when I had the power to save them, Naruto said simply. I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong one for the timeline, but it was the right one for them. Orochimaru was quiet for a long moment. You saved 8 lives today. Those Chunin, and the 5 others who would have died in that explosion you prevented. You also revealed capabilities you'd been hiding and raised questions about your connection to Jiraiya that will be difficult to explain. I know. And you'd make the same choice again, wouldn't you? If faced with the same situation? Every time, Naruto confirmed. Something that might have been respect flickered across Orochimaru's face. You really are from the future. No one in the present thinks like that anymore. This war has beaten idealism out of most shinobi. But you still believe saving individual lives matters more than strategic considerations. Lives always matter more than strategy, Naruto said firmly. That's not idealism. That's just being human. Perhaps that's why you become Hokage, Orochimaru mused. Hiruzen thinks like that too. It's simultaneously his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. He turned to head back to the others, then paused. For what it's worth, Naruto, I'm glad you made the choice you did. Those 8 shinobi have families, friends, futures. You gave those back to them. Thank you, Naruto said, surprised by the acknowledgement. Don't thank me yet. We still need to complete our mission, and IWA knows we're here now. Things are about to get much more difficult. Orochimaru's expression hardened back into the cold efficiency of a wartime commander. Rest while you can. In 2 hours, we move on the demolition corps. And this time, they'll be expecting us. They found the demolition corps 3 hours later, entrenched in a fortified position near the Canopy Bridge. Orochimaru's scouts reported at least 60 specialists protected by over 100 regular IWA shinobi, with more reinforcements likely en route. We can't take them head-on, Orochimaru assessed, studying the position from their hidden vantage point. They're too well defended. We need to draw them out, split their forces. Or we need a bigger distraction, suggested one of the Jonin. If Jiraiya's division engages their main force, they'll have to pull defenders from here. Communications are sporadic, another pointed out. We can't coordinate with Division 1 without risking interception. Naruto studied the enemy position, his mind working through possibilities. The demolition corps was the key. Eliminate them, and IWA couldn't destroy the Canopy Bridge or clear paths for their main force. But Orochimaru was right that a frontal assault would be suicide. Unless, what about the bridge itself? Naruto asked. If we destroyed it before IWA could secure it, their whole offensive collapses. They'd have to retreat. That's Division 4's contingency mission, Hikaru said. But they're not in position yet. It would take. An explosion in the distance cut him off. Then another. And another. The sound of massive detonations rolling across the landscape like thunder. That's coming from the direction of the bridge, Satsuki said, her face pale. Someone's already trying to destroy it. Orochimaru's expression turned grim. Division 4 must have been discovered and forced to act early. If they're engaged with the enemy. He made a decision. New plan. Half of us hit the demolition corps while they're distracted by the explosions. The other half moves to support Division 4 at the bridge. We can't let that mission fail. He started dividing the team, but Naruto interrupted. I should go to the bridge. Why? Orochimaru demanded. Because I know demolition techniques. If Division 4 is in trouble, I can help complete their mission. Naruto met the Sanin's eyes. And because I have a feeling about this, something's wrong. Those explosions came too early, too uncoordinated. Division 4 might be compromised. Orochimaru studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Take Hikaru and Satsuki with you. The rest of us will hit the demolition core. If you can destroy that bridge, do it. If Division 4 has succeeded, assist with their extraction. Either way, you have 30 minutes before we pull out. After that, you're on your own. Understood. And Naruto? Orochimaru's voice stopped him as he turned to leave. Don't die. Tsunade would kill me if I let her temporal anomaly get blown up on my watch. Despite the tension, Naruto grinned. I'll do my best. The three of them raced toward the bridge, covering ground with desperate speed. As they got closer, the sounds of combat became clearer. Kunai clashing, jutsu detonating, and underneath it all, a roaring sound that made Naruto's blood run cold. He knew that sound. Lava release. The Four Tails Jinchuriki is at the bridge. He shouted to his teammates. That's Son Goku's chakra signature. How can you tell? Hikaru asked, his Byakugan straining to see through the smoke and chaos ahead. Because I've fought all the Biju, Naruto thought but didn't say. Just trust me. We need to be careful. A Jinchuriki in combat is beyond what our team can handle. They crested a hill and finally saw the Canopy Bridge. It was massive, a stone structure spanning a deep gorge, easily 100 meters long and wide enough for supply wagons to cross 3 abreast. And it was under siege. Division 4, or what remained of it, was pinned down on the bridge's far side, maybe 8 shinobi out of what should have been 15. They'd managed to set explosive charges on several of the bridge's support columns. But IWA forces were preventing them from completing the detonation sequence. And in the center of the bridge, wreathed in lava and crimson chakra, was Rashi, the Four Tails Jinchuriki. The man was in his partial transformation state, his skin covered in a bubbling shroud of lava-like chakra. Every step he took melted the stone beneath his feet. Every punch he threw sent gouts of molten rock spraying across the battlefield. The Division 4 survivors were fighting desperately, but they were outmatched and everyone knew it. We need to help them, Naruto said, already starting forward. Are you insane? Satsuki grabbed his arm. That's a Jinchuriki. We're 3 shinobi. We can't fight that thing. We don't need to fight it, Naruto argued. We just need to buy enough time for Division 4 to complete their mission. Set the charges, blow the bridge, mission accomplished. And how exactly do we buy time against someone who can melt stone with their bare hands? Hikaru demanded. Naruto looked at the Jinchuriki, at the desperate Konoha shinobi, at the bridge that could turn the tide of this entire offensive. He thought about his promise to not change the timeline, his vow to preserve history. Then he thought about 8 shinobi who would die if he didn't act. I have a technique, he said quietly. Something I wasn't planning to use. But if I don't... He met their eyes. Those are our people down there. Our comrades. Can you really just watch them die? Satsuki and Hikaru exchanged glances. Finally, Hikaru nodded. What do you need us to do? Get to Division 4. Help them complete the detonation sequence. I'll handle the Jinchuriki. Handle it? Satsuki's voice rose. You can't seriously think. I don't need to beat it, Naruto interrupted. I just need to distract it. 5 minutes. That's all I need you to give me. Before they could argue further, Naruto charged down the hill toward the bridge, chakra already building in his palm, the spiral of compressed energy that was his signature, his legacy, his father's technique that hadn't been invented yet. He was about to introduce the world to the Rasengan 20 years early, and consequences be damned. Those Konoha shinobi were going to live. The Rasengan formed in Naruto's palm with a familiar, comforting spiral of chakra, blue-white energy condensed into a perfect sphere of rotating destruction. It felt like coming home after a long absence, like rediscovering a piece of himself he'd thought lost. But there was no time for sentiment. The Four Tails Jinchuriki had noticed his approach and was turning, lava chakra shroud flaring with hostile intent. Konoha scum! Rashi roared, his voice distorted by the Biju's influence. You think one more shinobi will make a difference? Naruto didn't answer. He closed the distance in 3 explosive bursts of speed and drove the Rasengan directly into the lava shroud surrounding the Jinchuriki. The collision was cataclysmic. Chakra met chakra in a violent release of energy that sent shockwaves rippling across the bridge. Stone cracked beneath their feet. The lava shroud peeled back where the Rasengan struck, revealing raw flesh beneath before the protective coating reformed. Rashi staggered backward, genuine surprise flashing across his face. What was that technique? Something you haven't seen before, Naruto replied, already forming another Rasengan. His chakra reserves were depleting faster than he'd like, but there was no choice. And something you won't see again if you're smart enough to back off. The Jinchuriki's eyes narrowed. You're that anomaly. The temporal displacement Iwa's intelligence warned us about. He grinned, showing teeth that had become pointed and bestial. They said you were dangerous. I think I'll enjoy melting you into the bridge. Rashi attacked with terrifying speed, his lava-coated fist rocketing toward Naruto's head. Naruto barely dodged, feeling the heat sear his skin even from the near miss. He countered with the Rasengan, but Rashi had learned from the first exchange. He deflected instead of blocking, redirecting the technique into the bridge's stone surface. The Rasengan carved a massive spiral crater into the ancient stonework. You're fast, Rashi acknowledged, circling now with more caution. And that technique of yours packs serious power. But you're not a Jinchuriki, are you? You don't have a Biju-S chakra to sustain you. How many more of those can you throw before you collapse? Not many, Naruto thought grimly. Maybe 3 more Rasengans before I'm running on fumes. Behind Rashi, Naruto could see Hikaru and Satsuki reaching Division 4's position, could see them frantically working to complete the explosive sequence on the bridge supports. They needed more time. Enough to keep you busy, Naruto said with more confidence than he felt. Come on, let's dance. What followed was the most desperate fight of Naruto's life since arriving in this timeline. Rashi was powerful, not as strong as some of the Jinchuriki Naruto had faced in his original timeline, but formidable nonetheless. The lava shroud made close combat nearly impossible, burning anything it touched, and the man had decades of experience channeling the Four-Tails power, using it with a precision that spoke to a hard-won partnership with his Biju. Naruto, meanwhile, was operating at a fraction of his normal capacity without Kurama's chakra. Every movement had to be perfect. Every dodge was measured in millimeters. One mistake would mean death. He used everything he'd learned. Tsunade's taijutsu principles to deflect attacks rather than block them. The Academy 3, substitution, transformation, and clone techniques, pushed to their absolute limits. Even genjutsu awareness that Sakura had drilled into him during their training sessions years, decades, in the future. And when opportunities presented themselves, he struck with the Rasengan. The second one caught Rashi in the shoulder, spinning the Jinchuriki like a top and tearing away a chunk of the lava shroud. The third one Rashi managed to avoid entirely, forcing Naruto to deliberately miss and instead destroy a section of bridge that IWA forces were using for cover. By the time Naruto formed his fourth Rasengan, his hands were shaking from chakra exhaustion. You're done, Rashi said, seeing his condition. That's your limit, isn't it? One more technique and you'll be completely spent. He was right. Naruto could feel his chakra reserves scraping bottom, could feel the temporal displacement symptoms worsening as stress and exhaustion took their toll. His vision was starting to blur at the edges, but behind Rashi, Hikaru was giving a thumbs-up signal. The charges were set. They just needed to get clear. You're right, Naruto admitted, letting the Rasengan dissipate. I'm done. But then... He smiled. I was just a distraction. Rashi's eyes widened in understanding just as Division 4 detonated the explosive charges. The Canopy Bridge had stood for over 300 years. It had survived earthquakes, floods, and countless attempts to destroy it during previous wars. It was a monument to engineering and endurance, built to last through the ages. It lasted exactly 12 more seconds. The explosion started at the base of the support columns and rippled upward in a carefully calculated sequence. Stone that had weathered centuries cracked like eggshells. Support beams that had held firm through disasters shattered like glass. The entire structure groaned, a sound like the earth itself screaming, and then it began to fall. No! Rashi roared, his lava shroud flaring as he tried to reach the Konoha shinobi who'd caused this catastrophe. The bridge. You've doomed your own people. But Naruto was already moving. He grabbed Rashi's arm, ignoring the searing pain as the lava shroud burned his hand, and used the Jinchuriki's own momentum to throw him backward. away from Division 4's position. They're not doomed, Naruto gasped, cradling his burned hand. They're winning. The bridge collapsed completely, taking IWA forces, supply wagons, and the Demolition Corps' last hope of maintaining their offensive with it. Tons of stone plummeted into the gorge below, raising a dust cloud visible for miles. Naruto saw Hikaru and the Division 4 survivors make a desperate leap for the near side of the gorge. Most of them made it. 2 didn't, their bodies disappearing into the dust and rubble below. Rashi roared in fury and prepared to charge, but a new voice cut through the chaos. Rashi! The bridge is gone! Mission failed. We're pulling back. An IWA commander was shouting orders, directing the surviving forces to retreat. Without the bridge, there was no way to maintain supply lines. Without the Demolition Corps, currently being torn apart by Orochimaru's division, there was no way to create alternative routes. The offensive was over. Rashi looked between Naruto and his retreating forces, rage and frustration warring on his face. Finally, with a snarl, he began backing away. This isn't over, Konoha scum. We'll meet again, and next time, I'll burn you down to ashes. Looking forward to it, Naruto managed, even though he could barely stand. The Jinchuriki vanished in a burst of lava chakra-enhanced speed, and suddenly Naruto was alone on what remained of the bridge, a jutting shard of stone extending maybe 20 feet from the edge of the gorge, before ending in a ragged cliff. His burned hand was agony. His chakra reserves were completely depleted. The temporal displacement symptoms were worse than ever. He could feel himself flickering slightly, like an image that couldn't quite stay in focus. And then his legs simply gave out. He was vaguely aware of someone catching him before he hit the ground. Of voices shouting medical terminology. Of being lifted and carried at high speed through the forest. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness claimed him was amber-brown eyes filled with worry, and blonde hair haloed by sunlight. Tsunade had found him. Naruto woke to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of organized chaos. He was in a medical tent. That much was obvious from the canvas walls and the rows of injured shinobi on cots around him. Someone had bandaged his hand in layers of medicated wrapping that numbed the worst of the pain. His chakra network felt like it had been scrubbed raw, but at least the dangerous flickering sensation had subsided. You're awake. Good. Tsunade appeared beside his cot, looking haggard but uninjured. Her medical coat was splattered with blood, hopefully not her own, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd been working non-stop. How long was I out? Naruto asked, his voice coming out as a croak. 18 hours. You collapsed from complete chakra exhaustion and temporal displacement destabilization. She picked up his bandaged hand with surprising gentleness, examining it with glowing diagnostic chakra. Second-degree burns across the palm and fingers. You're lucky you didn't lose the hand entirely. Lava-style chakra is notoriously difficult to treat. The mission? Naruto pressed. Did we? The Kanobi Bridge is destroyed. Iwa's offensive has stalled and they're in full retreat. Division 1 and 2 are pursuing to ensure they don't regroup. Tsunade set down his hand and met his eyes. You completed the mission. Congratulations. You also nearly killed yourself doing it, but everyone made it out. Division 4? 8 survivors out of 15 original members. 2 died in the bridge collapse. 5 more were killed before you arrived. Tsunade's expression was unreadable. But yes, the 8 who survived did so because you bought them time. Hikaru's report was very detailed about that. Then it was worth it, Naruto said simply. Was it? Tsunade's voice was sharp now. Was it worth revealing a technique that shouldn't exist yet? Orochimaru saw what you did, that spiraling chakra attack. He's been asking questions, making theories. It won't be long before he figures out it's related to the Flying Thunder God, and from there to connecting you to the 4th Hokage who doesn't exist yet. Naruto's stomach dropped. I didn't think about. No, you didn't think, Tsunade interrupted, her frustration boiling over. You just acted. Just like you've been doing since you arrived, revealing techniques, changing outcomes, saving people who might have been meant to die. No one is meant to die. Naruto shot back, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it as pain lanced through his exhausted body. Those were living, breathing people with families and futures. How could I just watch them get killed when I had the power to save them? Because your presence here is already a massive temporal paradox. Tsunade's hands clenched into fists. Every life you save, every technique you use, every word you speak potentially changes the future. Your future. The one you came from. What if by saving those 8 shinobi, you prevented the birth of someone important? What if one of them was supposed to die here, and their survival creates a cascade that prevents your own birth? Then maybe I was never supposed to exist in the first place. Naruto shouted back. Maybe my entire timeline was a mistake that needed to be corrected, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and let people die when I can save them. They glared at each other, both breathing hard. Around them, other injured shinobi were pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Finally, Tsunade's expression softened. She pulled up a stool and sat beside his cot, suddenly looking very tired. I'm not angry that you saved them, she said quietly. I'm angry that you almost died doing it. When they carried you in, your temporal displacement was so severe that you were flickering in and out of phase with reality. Another few minutes and you might have simply ceased to exist, erased from this timeline entirely. But I didn't, Naruto pointed out, this time. But what about next time? What about the time after that? Tsunade looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression. I've lost too many people already, Naruto. I don't want to add you to that list. Especially not when you disappear in a way where there wouldn't even be a body to mourn. Naruto was quiet for a moment, processing this. You care about me, he said, surprised. I mean, beyond just medical responsibility. Don't let it go to your head, Tsunade muttered, but there was no heat in it. You're an interesting patient. And maybe I see some of Nawaki in you. That same stubborn refusal to abandon people. That same idealism that war hasn't crushed yet. She stood, checking his bandages one more time. You're confined to bed rest for at least 3 days. No training, no missions, no heroics. Your chakra network needs time to recover, and I need to monitor your temporal stability. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Naruto agreed, too tired to argue. Good. I'll check on you in a few hours. She started to leave, then paused. And Naruto? That technique you used against the Jinchuriki. The spiraling chakra ball. What did you call it? Naruto hesitated. The Rasengan was his father's technique, created years in the future. But he'd already revealed it, already changed things. Rasengan, he said quietly. It's called Rasengan. Tsunade nodded slowly. I've never seen anything like it. The way it compressed and rotated chakra. It's revolutionary. Who taught it to you? Someone important, Naruto said. Someone who doesn't exist yet. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded and left. Naruto lay back on his cot, staring at the canvas ceiling of the medical tent. He'd changed things. Probably big things. The Rasengan was out in the world 2 decades early. 8 shinobi who might have died were alive. Orochimaru had seen things that would make him curious, make him ask questions. The timeline was definitely altered now. There was no going back to the careful preservation of history he'd intended. But looking around at the medical tent full of wounded shinobi who would live to see another day, who would go home to their families, who would have futures that extended beyond this war, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. 3 days of bed rest turned into a week as Tsunade insisted on extensive monitoring. During that time, Naruto learned several important things. First, the destruction of the Kanobi Bridge had indeed broken Iwa's offensive. They'd retreated back across the border, and peace negotiations were expected to begin within the month. The Second Shinobi War wasn't over, but this front was effectively won. Second, he'd become something of a legend among the Division 2 and 4 survivors. They'd spread the story of the mysterious Uzumaki who'd fought a Jinchuriki to a standstill and made the bridge destruction possible. Naruto found himself approached regularly by shinobi wanting to thank him, to shake his hand, to ask about the spiral technique he'd used. Third, and most concerningly, the Hokage wanted to see him. On the 8th day, Tsunade deemed him stable enough for the meeting. She accompanied him to the command tent where Hiruzen had established his forward base, her presence both comforting and nerve-wracking. Inside, they found not just the Hokage but all 3 Sannin. Jiraiya looked curious, Orochimaru analytical, and Tsunade. Well, she already knew everything. Naruto Uzumaki, Hiruzen began without preamble. Your actions during the Canopy Bridge operation were both extraordinarily brave and extraordinarily revealing. Reports indicate you engaged a Jinchuriki in single combat using a technique no one had seen before. A technique that Orochimaru describes as possibly derivative of the Flying Thunder God's chakra manipulation principles. Naruto swallowed hard. I can explain. I'm sure you can, Hiruzen interrupted, but his tone wasn't harsh. But before you do, let me share something with you. Do you know how many Konoha shinobi would have died if the Canopy Bridge hadn't been destroyed when it was? Naruto shook his head. Our intelligence estimates between 300 and 500 over the next 2 months of fighting. The bridge's destruction saved those lives. Hiruzen leaned forward. Your intervention made that destruction possible. So while you may have revealed future knowledge and altered the timeline, you also saved hundreds of our people. You're not angry? Naruto asked carefully. Oh, I'm concerned, Hiruzen clarified. Very concerned. But I'm also pragmatic. You're here, in our timeline, whether we like it or not. The question isn't whether you'll affect history. You already have. The question is how we manage that impact. Jiraiya spoke up. That technique he used? The spiraling chakra sphere. I felt it from half a mile away. It's got similar principles to some of my work on chakra rotation and compression. Where did you learn it? This was dangerous ground. Admitting that Jiraiya himself would invent the Rasengan could change his entire research direction, possibly preventing the technique's creation or altering it significantly. From someone who studied your work, Naruto said carefully. In my time, you're recognized as one of the greatest seal masters and chakra theorists who ever lived. The technique builds on principles you discovered. Jiraiya's eyebrows rose. I develop it? Or someone else does based on my research? The timeline's already changed, Naruto said. I don't know if telling you more will make things better or worse, but yes, in my original timeline, this technique exists, and it's based on research you'll conduct over the next several years. Fascinating, Orochimaru murmured. So by seeing the finished product, Jiraiya could potentially develop it years earlier than he would have naturally. That could accelerate his entire research trajectory, or send it in a completely different direction, Tsunade added. This is exactly the kind of temporal contamination we were worried about. Hiruzen raised a hand for silence. Naruto, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to think very carefully before answering. In your judgment, not as a temporal refugee, but as someone who served as Hokage, is the technique you use something that should exist in this time period? Will its existence here and now cause more harm than good? Naruto considered this carefully. The Rasengan had been a turning point in his training, a technique that had saved his life countless times. But it had also been dangerous in the wrong hands, as evidenced by how Kabuto and others had adapted it for their own purposes. The technique itself isn't inherently good or evil, he said finally. It's a tool. In the right hands, it saves lives. In the wrong hands, it destroys them. The same could be said of any powerful jutsu. A diplomatic answer, Hiruzen observed. But not quite what I asked? Then here's my real answer, Naruto said, meeting the Hokage's eyes. I think the technique existing now will change things. Maybe in big ways, maybe in small ones. But I also think that knowledge, once revealed, can't be unrevealed. The cat's out of the bag. All we can do now is decide how to handle it. I agree, Hiruzen said. Which is why I'm placing the technique under S-rank classification. Knowledge of its existence and principles will be restricted to this room and a select few trusted operatives. Jiraiya, you're forbidden from attempting to recreate or research it until I give explicit permission. Understood? Jiraiya looked disappointed but nodded. Understood, sensei. As for you, Naruto, Hiruzen continued, you're being reassigned. No more combat missions until we better understand the full implications of your temporal displacement. Instead, you'll be working directly with Tsunade on medical research and with me on temporal theory. We need to determine if there's any way to return you to your original timeline. And if there isn't? Naruto asked quietly. Then we'll deal with that when we must. But for now, you're too valuable, and too dangerous, to deploy in active combat again. The Hokage's expression softened slightly. This isn't a punishment, Naruto. It's a recognition that your knowledge and abilities are resources that need to be carefully managed. I understand, Naruto said, though part of him chafed at the restriction. Good. Dismissed. Tsunade, a word before you go. Naruto and the other Sannin filed out of the command tent. As they emerged into the afternoon sunlight, Jiraiya clapped Naruto on the shoulder. That spiral technique of yours. I'm not supposed to research it, but nobody said I couldn't appreciate its elegance. You've got good instincts, kid. Whoever taught you knew what they were doing. They learned from the best, Naruto said with a slight smile. Jiraiya laughed. Well, if that's me in the future, I'm flattered. Come find me sometime when you're not under Tsunade's watchful eye. I'd like to hear more about this research I supposedly do. He wandered off, leaving Naruto with Orochimaru. The pale Sannin studied him with those unsettling golden eyes. You're an interesting puzzle, Orochimaru said finally. Every answer you give raises 3 new questions. But I'll respect the Hokage's restrictions. He paused. Though I am curious about one thing. In your time, what became of the research into immortality and perfecting the human body? Naruto's blood ran cold. This was it, the seeds of Orochimaru's future obsession, already taking root. It led to suffering, Naruto said carefully. People who pursued it lost their humanity in the attempt to transcend it. The cost was always higher than the gain. Spoken like someone who saw the failures, Orochimaru observed. But what about the successes? Surely someone must have made progress? Orochimaru, Naruto said seriously, there are some lines that shouldn't be crossed. Some knowledge that costs too much to obtain. I can't stop you from pursuing your research. I don't have that authority, but I'm asking you, as someone who's seen where that path leads, don't lose sight of why you started. Don't sacrifice your humanity for power. Orochimaru was quiet for a long moment. I'll keep that in mind, he said finally, and walked away. Naruto stood alone outside the command tent, wondering if he just planted seeds that would grow into something terrible, or if he'd given Orochimaru a warning that might actually change his fate. The tent flap opened, and Tsunade emerged. Her expression was troubled. Come on, she said. We need to talk. Privately, she led him away from the command area, through the forest to a quiet clearing. Once they were alone, she turned to face him. Lord Third told me something. Something about Dan. Naruto's heart sank. What about him? He's being deployed to the Western Front tomorrow. High-risk mission, infiltration behind enemy lines in Rain Country. The kind of mission that... She trailed off, her hands clenching. The kind of mission that gets people killed. Tsunade, is this it? She demanded, her voice cracking slightly. Is this when I lose him? When he doesn't come back and I spend the next 40 years running from the grief? Naruto wanted to lie, to comfort her. But he'd already changed so much. What was one more alteration? I don't know, he admitted. The timeline's different now. Things I knew for certain in my original history might not happen the same way here. Dan's mission could succeed. He could come home safe. Or, he trailed off. Or he could die, just like he was always going to, Tsunade finished bitterly. And there's nothing I can do about it because trying to change it might make things worse. She sank down onto a fallen log, her head in her hands. After a moment's hesitation, Naruto sat beside her. You asked me before, he said quietly, if I would change the tragedies that shaped me. I said no, because they made me who I needed to be. But that's easy to say about my own suffering. It's a lot harder when it's someone else's pain. So what do I do? Tsunade asked. Just let it happen. Accept it? No. You fight for every moment you have with him. You make sure he knows how you feel. And if the worst happens, Naruto put a hand on her shoulder, you remember that grief means you loved someone enough for their loss to break you. That's not a weakness. That's proof you're human. Tsunade looked at him, tears streaming down her face. I hate this. I hate knowing what might be coming. I hate not being able to fix it. I know, Naruto said softly. But you're not alone. Whatever happens, you'll have people who care about you. People who'll help you rebuild. People like you? Tsunade asked, and there was something vulnerable in her expression that Naruto had never seen before. Yeah, Naruto said. People like me. They sat there in silence as the sun set, two people from different times bound together by the weight of knowledge that couldn't be unlearned, and a growing connection that neither of them had planned for. Neither of them noticed Jiraiya watching from the trees, a thoughtful expression on his face as he witnessed the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The weeks following the Canopy Bridge operation passed in a strange blur of routine and revelation. Dan's mission to Rain Country succeeded. He returned battered and exhausted but alive, and Tsunade's relief was palpable enough that even the normally oblivious Jiraiya commented on it. Naruto watched their reunion from a distance, seeing the way Dan held her, the way Tsunade clung to him like she was afraid he might vanish if she let go. It should have been a happy moment. It was a happy moment. So why did Naruto feel an uncomfortable tightness in his chest watching them together? He'd been assigned quarters in the village's medical district, close to the hospital where Tsunade spent most of her time. Their research sessions had become daily occurrences, ostensibly focused on medical techniques and temporal theory, but increasingly devolving into long conversations about philosophy, leadership, and the nature of sacrifice. Tsunade was brilliant, fierce, and uncompromising in ways that reminded Naruto why he'd always respected her. But this younger version also had a vulnerability that the older Tsunade had buried under layers of cynicism and sake. She laughed more freely, trusted more easily, and hadn't yet learned to hold the world at arm's length. And Naruto found himself drawn to her in ways that were becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "You're brooding again." Kushina's voice broke through his thoughts. Naruto looked up, startled. He was sitting on the roof of his apartment building, watching the sunset paint Konoha in shades of orange and gold. Kushina had climbed up to join him, settling down with the casual familiarity that had developed over the past month since Tsunade had finally introduced them. Meeting his mother as a teenager had been surreal. She was everything he'd imagined and nothing like he'd expected. Loud, energetic, quick-tempered but equally quick to forgive. She'd taken to him immediately, delighted to meet another Uzumaki, especially one who appreciated her tendency to solve problems with violence and ramen. "Just thinking," Naruto said. "About Tsunade?" Kushina asked with a knowing grin. "What?" "No. I was just..." Naruto stopped, seeing her expression. "How did you?" "Please," Kushina rolled her eyes. "I've got eyes, Databane. Everyone's noticed how you two look at each other." "Well, everyone except Dan, apparently, but he's kind of oblivious about that stuff." "There's nothing to notice," Naruto protested. "She's with Dan. They're happy together. I'm her research partner. And her friend." Kushina said skeptically. "And I'm the next Hokage." "Come on, Naruto, you can't fool me. I see how your face lights up when she enters a room, how you hang on her every word during your research sessions, how you get all protective when she pushes herself too hard." "That's just, I care about her," Naruto admitted. "As a friend. She's important to me." "Important how?" Kushina pressed. "Like a sister? Like a comrade? Or like something more?" Naruto was quiet for a long moment. "It doesn't matter what I feel," he said finally. "She's happy with Dan. I'm not going to interfere with that." "Even though you know what might happen to him?" Kushina asked quietly. "Tsunade told me you know things about the future. About people's fates. Especially because I know," Naruto said firmly. "If Dan's death is what shapes Tsunade into who she needs to become, then my feelings don't matter. The timeline is already compromised enough. I won't make it worse by..." He trailed off. "By what? By letting yourself be happy?" Kushina shook her head. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I once watched Jiraiya try to peek in the women's bath using an invisibility jutsu that was just him closing his eyes. Despite himself, Naruto laughed. "It's more complicated than that." "Life's always complicated," Kushina said. "But you know what I've learned? You can't live your whole life afraid of changing things. Sometimes change is good. Sometimes it's necessary. And sometimes..." She bumped her shoulder against his. "Sometimes the heart wants what it wants, and fighting it just makes everyone miserable." "Spoken from experience?" Naruto asked. Kushina's cheeks colored slightly. "Maybe. There's this guy, Minato Namikaze. He's a jonin, really smart, kind of quiet but in an intense way. He helped me when some kids were bullying me about my hair, and I thought he was the most amazing person I'd ever met. Naruto's breath caught. His father. She was talking about his father, and she didn't even realize. But I'm too scared to tell him how I feel, Kushina continued. What if he doesn't feel the same way? What if I ruin our friendship? What if, tell him, Naruto interrupted, his voice more intense than he'd intended. Kushina, trust me on this. Tell him exactly how you feel. Don't wait, don't second-guess yourself. Just tell him. She looked at him, surprised by his vehemence. You really think I should? I know you should, Naruto said. Minato's a good man. One of the best. And he'd be lucky to have someone like you. So yes, tell him. Before it's too late. Okay, Kushina said slowly. Okay, I will. But only if you promise to stop torturing yourself over Tsunade. If you care about her, if you really care, then you owe it to yourself to at least acknowledge it. Even if you never act on it. Naruto nodded slowly. Deal. They sat together watching the sunset, two Uzumaki bound by blood neither of them knew about, giving each other advice that would shape the course of history in ways either could predict. 2 months after the Canopy Bridge operation, Dan proposed to Tsunade. It was a small, private affair in the memorial garden where they'd first met. Naruto heard about it secondhand from Jiraiya, who heard it from Orochimaru, who'd apparently been in the area conducting some kind of research on plant-based toxins and witnessed the whole thing. She said yes, of course, Jiraiya reported, sitting across from Naruto in a small tea house. They're planning a summer wedding. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. Dan's a good guy. Probably the best thing that could have happened to her. Yeah, Naruto said, his tea suddenly tasting like ash. That's great. I'm happy for her. Jiraiya studied him over the rim of his own cup. You don't look happy. I am, Naruto insisted. Tsunade deserves happiness. Dan's a good man. They're good together. But? Jiraiya prompted. But nothing. There's no but. Naruto set down his cup, suddenly not thirsty. I should probably go. I've got research to catch up on. Sit down, kid, Jiraiya said, his voice carrying an unusual note of seriousness. We need to talk. And before you give me that look, this isn't about the Rasengan or temporal mechanics or any of that stuff. This is about you and Tsunade. There is no me and Tsunade, Naruto said flatly. Exactly my point. There should be. Naruto stared at him. What? Look, I'm not blind. Neither is anyone else who's spent time around you too. Jiraiya leaned forward. The way you look at each other, the way you understand each other without words, that connection, that's rare. That's the kind of thing that comes along once in a lifetime, if you're lucky. She's engaged, Naruto said. To Dan. Who she loves. Does she though? Jiraiya asked. Don't get me wrong, she cares about Dan. But love? I've known Tsunade since she was a kid, and I've never seen her look at Dan the way she looks at you. There's affection there, sure. Comfort. But not passion. Not that spark that makes life worth living. You're reading too much into it, Naruto argued, even as part of him desperately wanted to believe Jiraiya was right. Am I? Tell me honestly, if you weren't worried about the timeline, if you didn't know Dan's supposed fate, if there were no complications at all, would you pursue her? Naruto opened his mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, he'd been half in love with Tsunade since before he'd even arrived in this timeline. The older version had been his mentor, his Hokage, his inspiration. This younger version was all of that and more, vulnerable and fierce and brilliant and beautiful in ways that took his breath away. It doesn't matter what I would do, he said finally. She's made her choice. Choices can be unmade, Jiraiya pointed out. Especially when they're made for the wrong reasons. Dan's safe, Naruto. He's stable, predictable, everything Tsunade thinks she should want in a wartime marriage. But you? You challenge her. Push her. Make her think and feel and grow in ways Dan never could. And you think I should what exactly? Tell her she's making a mistake? Break up an engagement? Ruin her happiness for my own selfish. I think you should tell her the truth, Jiraiya interrupted. Tell her how you feel. Give her all the information before she makes a decision that affects the rest of her life. After that, if she still chooses Dan, you respect it and move on. But at least she'll have made the choice knowing all her options. I can't, Naruto said. I can't be that selfish. Not when I know what losing Dan does to her. What if me interfering now prevents her from becoming who she needs to be? Or what if, Jiraiya said quietly, you interfering is exactly what's supposed to happen? You keep talking about preserving the timeline, but kid, the timeline's already changed. You've saved lives, revealed techniques, altered major battles. Maybe the universe sent you here not to preserve history but to improve it. That's a dangerous way to think, Naruto warned. Maybe. But you know what's more dangerous? Spending your whole life wondering what if because you were too afraid to take a chance. Jiraiya stood, tossing some coins on the table to pay for the tea. Think about it. But don't think too long. Summer's only 3 months away. He left, and Naruto sat alone with his thoughts and his untouched tea. The next few weeks were torture. Naruto threw himself into his work with Tsunade, trying to maintain their professional relationship while ignoring the growing tension between them. But it was becoming increasingly impossible. There were moments, fleeting, charged moments, where their eyes would meet and something electric would pass between them, times when their hands would brush while reaching for the same medical scroll, and the contact would linger just a fraction too long. Conversations that started about cellular regeneration and somehow ended with them sharing their deepest fears and dreams. And through it all, Dan remained oblivious, planning a wedding with the woman Naruto was falling hopelessly in love with. It came to a head 3 weeks before the scheduled ceremony. Tsunade had invited Naruto to her apartment to review some research on temporal stabilization, a potential method for anchoring him more firmly to this timeline and reducing his displacement symptoms. They'd been working for hours when Tsunade suddenly threw down her brush in frustration. This isn't working, she said. None of it's working. The theory's sound but the practical application is impossible. We need chakra reserves and control precision that don't exist outside of. She stopped, looking at Naruto with sudden intensity. Unless we combined our chakra, your massive reserves with my control precision, that would require a deep synchronization, Naruto said carefully. It's not like normal medical procedures where the patient is passive. We both need to be actively channeling, and that means, he trailed off, physical contact, Tsunade finished. Sustained, intimate contact to maintain the chakra connection. She met his eyes. Are you comfortable with that? No, Naruto's mind screamed. This is a terrible idea. You're engaged. I'm in love with you. This can only end badly. If it helps stabilize my temporal displacement, then yes, his mouth said instead. Tsunade nodded, moving closer. Okay. This is going to feel strange at first. I need you to open your chakra network completely. No barriers, no defenses. You'll be completely vulnerable, so you need to trust me absolutely. I do, Naruto said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. She placed her hands on his chest, and immediately Naruto felt her chakra flowing into him, gentle, precise, exploring his network with the delicate touch of a master surgeon. He opened himself to it, letting her chakra intertwine with his own. The sensation was intensely intimate. He could feel her emotions through the connection, concentration, determination, but underneath that, something else. Confusion. Conflict. And beneath that, desire. She felt it too. He could tell by the way her breath hitched, the way her chakra stuttered for just a moment before she regained control. Naruto, she whispered, her voice strained. Your chakra it's responding to mine. Reaching for it. Like it recognizes me. Maybe it does, Naruto said softly. Maybe on some level, we've always known each other. Across timelines, across years. Maybe that's why this feels so right, Tsunade finished, her eyes locked on his. Why this feels so right. They were inches apart now, her hands still on his chest, his chakra wrapping around hers in a dance that was becoming less medical and more emotional with every passing second. Tsunade, Naruto said, his voice rough. You should know. I need to tell you. Don't, she interrupted, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Please don't. Because if you say what I think you're going to say, then I'll have to make a choice. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to make the right one. What's the right choice? Naruto asked. The safe one. The logical one. The one that doesn't risk everything on a feeling that might just be temporal displacement affecting our chakra compatibility. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face even as she didn't pull away. Dan is good. He's stable. He's offered me a future I can plan for. Marrying him makes sense. And what do I offer? Naruto asked, even though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Chaos, Tsunade said with a broken laugh. Uncertainty. A connection I don't understand but can't deny. The possibility that everything I think I know about love is wrong. And maybe, she took a shaky breath, maybe the kind of happiness I've been too afraid to even dream about. So choose chaos, Naruto urged, his hands coming up to cup her face. Choose uncertainty. Choose me. I know I'm asking for everything and offering nothing but complications, but Tsunade, A knock at the door shattered the moment. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, Tsunade hastily wiping her eyes while Naruto tried to get his chakra under control. She opened the door to find Dan standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. Surprise! He said with a warm smile. I finished my mission early and thought I'd. He stopped, noticing Naruto. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were working. Should I come back later? No, it's fine, Tsunade said, her voice only slightly unsteady. We were just finishing up. Naruto was just leaving, actually. Dan's smile returned. Great. I was hoping we could finalize the seating arrangements for the ceremony. My mother's being difficult about where to place the Nara clan representatives, and I need your diplomatic skills. Of course, Tsunade said. She glanced at Naruto, and in her eyes he saw apology, regret, and something that looked heartbreakingly like goodbye. Thank you for your help with the research, Naruto. I'll see you at the next session. Yeah, Naruto managed. See you then. He left the apartment, walking through Konoha's streets without seeing them, his mind replaying those moments over and over. The feel of her chakra intertwining with his. The look in her eyes. The choice she'd almost made before duty and fear pulled her back. He found himself at the Hokage monument, standing before the 3 carved faces and thinking about the ones that should be there but weren't yet. His father's face. Tsunade's face. His own face, in a future that might not even exist anymore. Complicated, isn't it? Naruto turned to find Hiruzen standing behind him, pipe in hand, looking every inch the wise leader. Lord Hokage, Naruto said. I didn't hear you approach. Old habits, Hiruzen said, moving to stand beside him. I often come here when I need to think. To remember the weight of the position and the people who've borne it before me. And after you, Naruto added quietly. Indeed. Hiruzen was quiet for a moment. Jiraiya tells me you're in love with Tsunade. Naruto's head whipped around. He what? Don't be angry with him. He's concerned about you. About both of you. The Hokage took a long draw on his pipe. He's also convinced that she returns your feelings, and that her engagement to Dan is more about security than love. It doesn't matter what either of us feels, Naruto said firmly. She's made her choice. I have to respect that. Even if it's the wrong choice, how can I know if it's wrong? Maybe she's supposed to marry Dan. Maybe their time together, however short, is important to who she becomes. I can't play God with other people's lives just because I want something different. A noble sentiment, Hiruzen acknowledged. But let me ask you something. In your time, when Tsunade was Hokage, when you knew her as your mentor and leader, was she happy? Naruto thought about the Tsunade he'd known. Brilliant, powerful, beloved by the village. But also haunted, drinking too much, carrying ghosts she could never fully lay to rest. She was fulfilled, he said carefully. She found purpose in protecting the village, in healing, in leading. But happy? I don't know if she ever truly let herself be happy. And you think marrying Dan will give her that happiness? I think. Naruto paused, choosing his words carefully. I think in my original timeline, Dan died and it broke something in her. But maybe in this timeline, with everything that's already changed, he doesn't die. Maybe they get their happy ending together. Or maybe, Hiruzen said gently, you're so focused on preserving what you think should happen that you're ignoring what could happen. What should happen, if people were free to follow their hearts instead of their fears? You think I should fight for her, Naruto said. I think you should give her the choice, Hiruzen corrected. Not the choice between duty and desire, she's already made that one, but the choice between two different possible futures, both of which she deserves to understand fully before she commits to one forever. And if I do that and she still chooses Dan, then you accept it with grace and move forward. But at least she'll have made the choice with all the information, including the knowledge that she's deeply loved by someone who would risk everything for her happiness. Hiruzen placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. You've already changed so much, Naruto. You've saved lives, altered battles, revealed techniques decades before their time. Maybe it's time to accept that you weren't sent here to preserve the past. Maybe you're here to create a better future. Even if that future includes stealing the bride 3 weeks before her wedding. With that, the Hokage walked away, leaving Naruto alone with the carved faces of the past and the weight of an impossible decision. Naruto didn't sleep that night. He paced his apartment, arguing with himself in circles. Tell her. Don't tell her. Fight for her. Let her go. Risk everything. Risk nothing. By dawn, he'd made his decision. He would tell her. Not to pressure her, not to steal her away from Dan, but simply to give her the complete truth before she made a choice that would shape the rest of her life. After that, whatever she decided, he would accept, even if it broke his heart. He found her at the hospital just after sunrise, finishing a night shift in the emergency ward. She looked exhausted but beautiful, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her medical coat rumpled from hours of work. Naruto? She said, surprised to see him. What are you doing here so early? We need to talk, he said. Privately. Something in his tone made her nod. She led him to an empty consultation room and closed the door. What's this about? She asked, though from the way she wouldn't quite meet his eyes, he suspected she knew. Yesterday, Naruto began. When we were synchronizing our chakra. What you felt was a side effect of the technique, Tsunade interrupted quickly. Chakra synchronization can create false emotional bonds. It's well documented in medical literature. What we experienced wasn't real. Don't, Naruto said softly. Don't lie to yourself. To me. We both know what we felt was real. What we feel is real. It doesn't matter, Tsunade said, but her voice wavered. I'm engaged, Naruto. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Invitations have been sent. Dan's family is traveling from across Fire Country. I can't just. I love you, Naruto said, and the words hung in the air between them like a jutsu that couldn't be recalled. Tsunade's eyes went wide, her breath catching. I'm in love with you, Naruto continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I have been since before I even met this version of you. The older you, in my timeline, was my mentor and inspiration. But this you, young, fierce, still believing the world can be saved. You're everything I never knew I needed. And I know the timing is terrible. I know you're engaged to a good man who loves you. I know I should have kept my mouth shut and let you live your life. But you deserve to know the truth before you make a choice that affects the rest of your life. Tsunade was crying openly now, her hands covering her mouth. Naruto, I can't. This is too much. You're asking me to throw away security, to risk everything on something that might just be temporal displacement affecting our judgment. Stop hiding behind excuses, Naruto said gently. Tell me honestly, do you love Dan? I care about him, Tsunade said. He's kind and stable and he wants the same things I want. That's not what I asked. Do you love him the way you need to love someone to spend the rest of your life with them? Does your heart race when he enters a room? Does he challenge you to be better than you thought you could be? Do you think about him constantly? Dream about him at night? Feel like part of you is missing when he's not there? No, Tsunade whispered. God help me, no. I feel all of those things about you. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Then choose me, Naruto urged, stepping closer. I know I can't promise you safety or stability. I don't even know how long I'll be in this timeline. But I can promise you'll never doubt that you're loved. That every day we have together will matter. That I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the choice you made. Tsunade looked at him, tears streaming down her face, clearly torn between duty and desire, between the safe choice and the right one. I need time, she said finally. This is too big a decision to make in a moment. I need to think, to talk to Dan too. Of course, Naruto said, even though waiting would be agony. Take all the time you need. But Tsunade? Whatever you decide, know that I meant every word. You're worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. He left before she could respond, his heart pounding, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. He'd done it. He'd told her the truth. Now all he could do was wait, and hope that love would be enough to overcome fear. The next 3 weeks would determine the course of both their futures, and possibly the fate of the timeline itself.